Here.
Nick Souter.
Here.
Nancy Stubbs.
Here.
Anna Valdez.
Here.
Were they the ones that should be called the citizens?
It's Paul Ducks, and Kristen Sanchez. Thank you.
We have a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
I'd like to amend the motion that we move the FAC and DAC review to consent, and that we eliminate the executive session.
I
Aye.
accept the amendment.
The second?
I second.
Nancy, did you want to remove executive session?
He said I did that.
Oh, and executive.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I'm
could-
sorry.
Slipped it
I
right
missed that
in.
one. Sorry.
Snuck it right in.
Any discussion? Sarah?
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Souter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Mariana Valdez.
Aye.
Can we stand for the pledge, please? We can. Please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we move the fact, we're moving the report.
No, we're not moving the report, we're moving, there's
The
a
approval.
approval.
Okay. So we're still doing fact year-end report.
Yes.
Here's John.
I think Cheryl.
Cheryl Weiskamp?
Yeah.
And John's here too.
Allison's here.
Yeah, we have the written report up
Yeah, the
here.
written
Yeah,
report.
so
Okay,
if you want to just, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just want to add to it.
Okay, yeah. The only thing that I would like to add is, in the last few months, we've added a few members to the FAC, and we have a few of them here tonight. Mr. John Wells is here, and Allison Iker is here. So they came to hear the report, but we won't necessarily need to do it in a verbal report. But I just wanted to say again how delightful it has been to serve on the committee, and we're really thrilled with our new members. In addition to those two, we also have another new member, Eric Iker. I think he was going to try to be here, but I don't think he showed up yet. But anyway, wanted to thank you, and again, we appreciate being able to serve the board. And anything else we can do for you in the future, let us know. I know you have our comments, and we do. The one thing I really want to emphasize as a CPA and a controller myself is how important staff is. And we have a high level degree of confidence in staff at this time. So that's the thing that I would like to emphasize to you all. So great, thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, we get to do that.
That's right.
You mentioned one thing. Is there anything from the report you'd like to highlight?
That was that one thing. The other thing that I think that is that we talked about quite a bit was the high percentage of the budget that is spent on staffing costs. Now, I get it. You know, I work at the college. The biggest part of our budget is staffing costs and personnel. That's inevitable. But when we start getting pretty high above 80%, that's starting to get a little high. And so we have some concern about that. It's a really hard push and pull between trying to get people a wage that's livable and that's appropriate for this community with limited resources. So we face it all the time at the college as well. So, but there was a lot of discussion about, the limited funds that are available for other kinds of resources for our district. So that's the only other thing I'd like to highlight was that was something the committee felt that we needed to be keeping a really close eye on. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Cheryl.
5A, public participation and correspondence. Do we have any forms that were turned in?
I think we have Mary Hammond.
And it's in your book, Nancy.
It's in your book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's all.
Oh, right, okay, the one that we got ahead of time.
Yep.
Okay. So, Mary Hammond?
Right?
So even though we have your form for the public record, we need you to state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Mary Hammond. I live at 54 Tanglewood Drive in Durango. And I'm here to talk about some concerns relating to the district entering into contracts with Mercy Hospital to provide medical oversight and athletic trainers at Durango High School and district middle schools. I have already provided to the board members a detailed summary of my concerns relating to the agreement and related contracts. 9R has had a historic relationship with Mercy Hospital that I'm aware of, but in this past school year, the relationship was memorialized in a memorandum of understanding, and new contracts were signed to include athletic trainers at DHS as well as the middle schools. The total of the contracts was about $81,000 some odd dollars. Nowhere in the board minutes was it noted that this MOU was subject to any board approval or notification, nor did I see any competitive bid procedure in place at the time that those contracts were signed. Competitive bids exist to create an environment that's transparent and fair and ensures the most effective use of taxpayer money. While the district says it would like to increase transparency, changes to the competitive bidding procedures and the way that this agreement was executed was not transparent, and it did not involve the community stakeholders. By relying exclusively on one provider to provide medical oversight without reviewing possible other for services, the district was limiting its options for optimal care at student athletic events. Also, the district put signage up in the schools actively promoting Mercy Sports Medicine. They did not have to pay required standard advertising rates for these signs. It appears to give preferential treatment to Mercy and to that medical group. After inquiring about the arrangement, I did meet with Deputy Superintendent Andy Burns. I found out that trainers are not subject to background checks through the 9R system. Rather, Centura is in charge of that process. Given the close interaction that trainers have with the students, this could be a safety risk as well as a significant liability for the district. It was also not transparent as to where the monies used to compensate Mercy for this service were captured in financial statements. After seeking clarification, I learned that they're paid out of the Fund 23 Interscholastic Activity Fund, which is currently under scrutiny and requiring budget cuts in the next year because they're not able to fund the stadium loan. So overall, this particular agreement brought up some concerns as a community member about the transparency and how it was negotiated. Since I brought these concerns up, what's more concerning is that significant policy changes have been made to all the operational expectation policies. I looked for minutes for the last 6 months. They're not available publicly from these board meetings, but I did look at the agendas as well. Operational expectation policies, nearly every policy related to my issue has been changed. For example, the new financial administration policy no longer requires the use of the competitive bid procedures, nor even presenting an RFP for the annual audit. The new policies give the superintendent even more leeway with respect to contracting services without any requirement as far as bidding process or board approval. As far as I can tell, there's no limit in place when it comes to contracting professional services in our district. And as a citizen and a taxpayer, that's concerning to me. And that, maybe I got more than 3 minutes. I was prepared
I
to
think
speak
we
quickly.
cheated a little for you, Don.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you sending it. Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
I do appreciate you sending that in advance so that we could start looking at it. And, as I emailed you, the superintendent's with that opportunity is going to respond. That doesn't necessarily mean that whatever we're doing isn't, but that's just during his report he's going to respond. These things take time. So
I understand. And I mean, I think the the biggest thing is partnering with the community that we're in and keeping the options open and bringing in the most qualified, capable people to our athletes and to our students in the interest of student health care and the community. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Also, if you would, the next agenda item is going to address these issues, so if you'd like to stay, there might be some answers for you.
Yes, I do plan to. And in that memo that I sent, I did offer some possible solutions. But I really encourage each board member to review all the policies and procedures that you've recently approved and make sure you're okay with the limits and parameters or not that have been set.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
6A, athletic training information.
Sarah will pull up the PowerPoint. I provided this to the board earlier today, as well as I did add a slide, so I'll point that out as we went through. I realized there was one concern Ms. Hammond had expressed that I had not addressed in the initial presentation. So, Sarah, if you could go ahead and display at the little bottom. Yeah, you can do it up there too. So just want to review the history of our athletic training. Okay, I was going to say it's over here. Of our athletic training relationship with Mercy. Sarah, if you'd go ahead and go to the next. We've been in a contract with Mercy Medical Center since 2008. Mercy had assumed that training contract when the training room was acquired by Mercy. That was a local clinic that offered physical therapy, sports medicine, sports performance, and athletic training services in 2008. We actually believe there was a relationship prior to that, but that's prior to my time, and so we can definitely document that formal relationship back to 2008. Currently, Mercy provides athletic training services to all high schools and middle schools within the region. They are the sole provider right now to all of our schools. And one of the things that makes it important is to recognize that when our students compete at some of our neighboring districts, those athletic trainers are commonly trained and are able to provide information back. So should one of our students experience an injury while playing in Montezuma Cortez or while playing in Bayfield, those athletic training services actually provide consistent support for them. One of the things that's really important to note is that the agreement is not exclusive. Currently, we still share, we alternate games with ASH. We have an orthopedic doctor on the sideline every other game. So actually, each game, one of the things that Mercy has done through their contract is to continue to honor those agreements that have existed for a long time. So we do not only have Mercy doctors on the sidelines providing oversight during games, specifically football, high contact sports, but we actually do have a rotation with ASH on the field. And that's one thing that Will McConnell, the CEO of Mercy, has really felt strongly that we continue to keep those relationships open, because we know there are families who choose to go to other providers that are not Mercy related. Our contract specifically states that when a child's injured, after the athletic trainer provides support, the request is, do you have a specific provider you'd like to go to? We never want to override a family's desire to stay with their own practitioner. When a family says, no, I don't, if it's a Mercy athletic trainer, they do have the ability of making the family an appointment immediately on the spot. They actually have access to the appointment scheduler and can go in and schedule the family to be seen the next day if that's something that the family requests to do so. So by no means is our agreement exclusive, because we do still have ASH doctors who are on the sideline. The medical directorship is new this year. One of the things we piloted this year was actually hiring our own athletic trainer. So for years we've had Mercy athletic trainers on our working with our students. This year we had a desire to expand into some pre-med programs within our career track. And so we hired an athletic trainer who could also teach. If they worked for us and they were licensed through us, then they could actually teach some of those CTE courses. in pre-medicine and athletic training in particular. And so one of the things we were faced with was we had someone who also served as an athletic trainer to our students, our athletes, who no longer had medical oversight. And so what we felt was really important is that we continue with the same level of medical oversight. An athletic trainer is overseen by a doctor. They don't function on their own. And so we felt like it was in our best interest to continue that relationship with Mercy, who had medical oversight of the other athletic trainers within our district. So that is new this year, that we expanded that. And Mercy was willing to take that on. That took on liability and responsibility for them to actually provide oversight to someone who's not their employee. And that was really an out-of-the-box solution for us. While we were working through that, and you recall we've worked heavily on our concussion protocol, our district nurses actually approached us with the concern that they did not have a doctor that they could call or refer to in situations where they felt like they needed a medical opinion. And so in developing that medical directorship, we actually expanded it. So we expanded it so that our nurses could also reach out to the medical directorship that was assigned from Mercy to just provide that level of support and consultation for our nurses. When we this next year, we will not continue with our athletic director or athletic trainer, the district's employee. They actually will be teaching a full line next year. They're actually going to pick up some of the science classes that they were short a science teacher. So that medical directorship will no longer be needed for the athletic training side. The nurses have expressed an interest in continuing to have that medical consultation when they feel like there's a need. That's not referring patients, but just a medical doctor they can call to consult with. I do want to point out a couple of things. Colorado Statute 2239-109 exempts boards from the bid process when it involves professional services.
Dan, could
yes.
you talk a little bit
I'm
about
sorry.
what professional services
Sure.
are?
Absolutely. Professional services are any services that require specific licensure or knowledge and experience. A prime example would be when the board wanted training this year on coherent governance. There's one organization that created coherent governance. You did not go out for a bid process. You called them and said, we would like you to come and work with our board around our model of governance. So professional services is when you're not really looking for the lowest cost. You're looking for someone who has specific experience or connections within that field that allows that person to have value to the district. And so that statute's been in place for a long time. The operational expectation 8.3 has not changed. That's actually been consistent since the board unpacked our operational expectations under financial administration. And that did comply with the law, which stated that professional services are not subject to the bid process. What we did find, though, that when we, looking at our board policy JDE, which is a district policy that the law requires the board to weigh in on, policy JDE listed instructional services, not professional services. So we had a conflict in those two policies. So we had JDE that recognized that it was instructional services that weren't subject to the bid process. We had 8.3, which said they were exempt from the bidding process. Last year, 2017, as you know, CASB produces a policy update each and every year after the legislative session. After the 2017 legislative session, there was some guidance from the Uniform Grant guidance out of the federal government that specifically touched on the bid process when federal dollars were involved. As a result, CASB released recommended language for that policy, JDE, and it was at that time in September that we identified that our policy was out of line not only with 8.3, but with statute. And so I do actually have for you the bidding policy or the bidding procedures by policy JDE that exists. I have a copy for Ms. Hammond too, if she'd like it. And the changes that were made and the draft language from CASB. So CASB offered two options. One, they did offer an option if the board chose to include professional services, and they offered an option if the board chose to comply with the statute, which said you do not need to. That was brought to you. Second reading was the end of October, and you approved that change, policy JDE. And all of this background had been provided to you as to why that change was being made.
So I have a question about professional services.
Mhm.
So is a plumber a professional service?
Could be. It could be. It's really...
Because plumbers have a licensure sort of expectation as well, and if that's the,
I would tell you where that might apply would be as if we had a specific boiler that a plumber had experience with that it's not typical for plumbers. We might choose to exempt a plumber from a bid process for that. If we were looking for general plumbing, there
Right,
would be
it'd be
no
a
reason we would exempt the bid process. So it is a case-by-case consideration that we take into account as we move forward, and we always bring those bids ultimately back to you if we go through a bidding process.
So same kind of thing, like if we were on a really old operating system and we had to hire somebody who had experience from 30 years ago to noodle around with it, so, yeah.
So, just using that boiler example of a plumber, under what wouldn't that information come out through a bid process anyway, though? So if you have a bid and you have 3 plumbers, just that information that that person is skilled in that particular
Sure.
boiler, that would advance them.
Sure.
So I
You
don't
have
see-
a bid before you tonight, the consent agenda,
Right.
that is not going with the lowest bidder, but the director who did the RFP justified why they felt the other bidder was the best, because
Right.
it's a particular brand that allows commonization of our fleet.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
if-
when that would come out.
so you're saying if you have an RFP that's specific enough, that should come out.
Yeah, I think that I don't understand why professional services are exempt, because I don't see a situation under which, like, I see it to be too broad and that everything can fit under there if you want it to.
And this instructional services struck me the same way.
Mhm.
'Cause-
Yeah, and again, the board in October chose to go that direction. You have the option, certainly, if you want to revise that policy, to do so. It is your policy. I think in the past, like I said, your example of the Aspen Group is there are times, and again, there are times where it applies, there are times where it's best to go out. When we went out for PCC's remodeling, we did an RFP. We weren't looking for a particular contractor. We were looking for someone who could do it and commit to doing it for the least amount of money. More often than not, that's what you'll find that we do as a district. In the case of athletic training services, this has been a long-standing partnership, and we have involved other medical providers. So this is the first time that it's come to my attention that there's interest in that contract, because it's been done by Mercy for so long. So certainly it doesn't prevent us from looking at other options and other providers. I think, again, there's rationale for why the bid process wouldn't be used, but certainly it could be if that was something we were interested in doing. If I can continue, you did have a board linkage on January of 2017 where we brought Mercy representatives, our athletic director at the time, our athletic trainers, and we did have a conversation at that time about the direction of our athletic training. It was at that time where we shared with the board our intent to hire our own, the fact that we were going to look to build a stronger partnership with Mercy. So I do want to alert you to the fact that did occur. It was a linkage that the board members who were here at that time engaged with. Dave Pressler was here along with Colin Tomlinson from Mercy. I believe Dave Brzee was even here as well. I don't think he was on our initial invite list, but I believe Dave came to really talk about this expansion that we've seen over the last year in having increased athletic training support services at all levels. That involved also our concussion protocol. If you remember at the time, we were looking at implementing a concussion protocol and a concussion policy of how we would be dealing with that. And the athletic trainers were a key part of that, not just because of our athletics, but recognizing that we have more and more kiddos coming to school who are suffering from concussions. and having that expertise on campus. So our athletic trainers in both middle schools have also really done far more than just consulted around students who are injured on the ball field or on the court. So I do want to draw that attention. It would be unfair and incorrect to say that the board had no knowledge of this process and what we were doing, that this was something that began with the linkage quite some time ago, and then we've given you some updates on the concussion protocol work since then. But this was the first one that, just in doing a search of your agendas, that I came across. As far as background checks, I can tell you that we have a lot of organizations who do their own background checks. We require that they do the same level of background checks. They provide us the evidence and the documentation of what was found in the background checks. When somebody is employed by a third party that is entered into an MOU with us, it is not uncommon for us to say, let's not both do background checks. There is financial implication in that. If we run a background check and they've already run a background check, then we're both paying for the very same information. And so we do that with Axis, we do that with La Plata Youth Services, we do that with Fort Lewis College, we do that with Pueblo Community College, just to name a few. So it is not uncommon for us to say if an organization that we're partnering with is doing a background check, that we accept their background check. They do have to provide us evidence of that and documentation and what they found in that background check. So again, all of our athletic trainers, all 4 of them, are background checked in our schools, actually to maybe even a more rigorous level than our background check provides right now.
So, thank you for this presentation. It's helpful. But one of the questions I didn't hear addressed was, and one of the things that Ms. Hammond talked to both Mariana and I about, was the marketing aspect, where there's some sort of marketing arrangement. Can you describe that?
Yeah, what we did was we did place a sign with the name of the athletic trainer that is contracted and referencing our partnership with Mercy through our MOU agreement. That's in our agreement that we would acknowledge. That's also sharing the liability. So again, when their athletic trainers are on the field, the liability for their performance and the liability for their judgment is on Mercy. And so we felt very strongly that we wanted to be very public about that decisions that are being made by the medical director who they've appointed and the athletic trainers who they employ are Mercy's. And we felt like that was really important that we make that very clear. This past year, we had some employee matters where it wasn't very clear. Is it 9R's responsibility? Is it Mercy's responsibility? And there actually were some old signages. In fact, at the high school, there was still an ASH sign about a partnership. And so we had some parents who were confused, thinking, oh, ASH is our athletic trainer's supervisor, when in fact they aren't. And so we felt like the signage was necessary to clarify who is ultimately responsible for the medical issues that were taking place or the medical matters that were being overseen. And so we posted signs in all of the athletic training rooms so that it was very clear that those employees were actually Mercy's. I felt like that was more transparency than it was advertising. It's not out on the marquee. It's not out in front. It's not out on the field. It's literally where children are being served. And we felt like that was very appropriate to make sure that people understood who those employees reported to.
So that even though you have alternative MDs, you alternate MDs, the athletic trainers are always responsible to a Mercy MD.
If an injury occurs on the field and the ASH doctor is there, typically the student's transported to ASH, and that medical doctor takes control. If the injury occurs and there's not a medical doctor there, that the trainer either supports the student until paramedics arrive, and then the paramedics transport to the hospital of choice at the parents' request, and then that's handed off to the appropriate doctor. So the arrangement. Rich Lawton and I believe it's Field Bevins with the doctors. That they are no longer with either institution, but that really is where that partnership was arranged so that there would be sharing. Getting an orthopedic doctor to be on the sideline every game is a challenge, and so sharing has actually been really helpful because we can provide coverage at every game because it's not the same doctor who has to be there every game.
I think you said that they share some of the liability since they're on the field?
A doctor's always liable to themselves when they serve patients. So the athletic trainer's liability is Mercy's.
So Mercy, there is a cost to Mercy then to cover that liability?
Absolutely.
So they have a financial contribution?
Mercy's extended their umbrella for us through their medical directorship.
So it's not, what I'm trying to get at is that they basically are contributing financially to
they are.
this.
Yeah. Again, when you think about we have four athletic trainers full-time employed by the district, and it's $82,000. Our athletic trainer was on the teacher scale, starting salary of $40,000. So actually, we feel like what we're paying to have those full-time athletic trainers on site is actually quite a deal.
So, I'm going to ask very clearly, do you feel like we've been legal and following policy?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Any questions for?
No, I'll follow up with him on some stuff and see what, if anything we should be doing, if we need to change the policy or something in August. A couple things have happened, we had a couple but they came in, we were done with it.
Yeah.
5:40, so I think it'd be okay.
Yeah. Let's finish with this though.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments for Dan? There may be some follow-up later if we look at the policy
Sure.
and say it's what we really want or
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah, we are unpacking the new OEs. So 8.3 was the OE that was in place at the time that the concern is framed under the time frame. So certainly it would be helpful in August for the board to give us feedback if there's different direction. Because I think our thought was based upon your approval of JDE,
Absolutely.
that would continue to be the direction we go. So we're certainly open to that.
Yeah, and policy is always something we review when we need to and deal with it as it comes.
Absolutely.
We have,
Madam President, we have two people who have submitted
Yeah, I
public
was just-
participation.
yeah.
Do you want to go back? and
Is the
do
board open to that? Some
I'm
people that
fine.
came in
Yeah,
after we
we-
closed it.
Sure.
We clicked through.
We're a lot faster, we're ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
so
was
we'll
scheduled
go
for
back
6
to
o'clock.
public participation.
We just
There's a form in the
form.
back if you wanted to also speak.
so this is something I haven't gotten to yet. This is both. This is
Training for relationship. Okay, sure. So, yeah, if other board, audience members want to speak, just fill out your paperwork and give it to the board clerk. Thank you.
Okay, it just sold by paper.
So we could get started, because I
Yeah,
think
let's get
everybody's.
Molly Weiser. Name and address, and then you have 3 minutes, please.
My name is Molly Weiser, and I work at Fort Lewis College, and as the Title IX coordinator. My address is 386 Needham Circle here in Durango. I am in the business of confronting students regarding their unsafe behaviors and creating creative and educational interventions for those behaviors. I don't use a gun. I've been doing it for 10 years. The arguments that I heard about for this resolution to arm people in the schools have to do with other schools doing it. Everybody doing it is not a good argument. Program effectiveness would be an argument. I haven't seen any information or data that this is an effective program for safety in schools. I'm also hearing that there was a quote from President Stubbs that whether or not the board approved such a resolution would depend on the amount of community support. You are intended to be leaders. You are not intended to go by the popular vote of the community. And I insist that you use our tax dollars responsibly. based on effectiveness of the program and demonstrated effectiveness. I feel that guns in schools are a danger to children, they are a danger to staff and faculty, and they should be approached with the utmost responsibility and care. I recommend that 9R demonstrate to the community that is effectively using what is called a BIT team, a behavioral intervention team, to assess risk in schools. And I have further information available about that if you would like to know about it. I insist that the school explore options such as Project Prevent. I've sent an email about that to all of you. It's a grant proposal from the federal government that we can apply for as 9R to increase safety in schools without resorting to guns. And I also must also insist that we not pass this resolution on a day when the meeting was supposed to have been held a week ago. This was a postponed meeting. Finding out about the meeting was a matter of digging into the board's website to find out that the meeting was even occurring. This issue was posted about 2 hours ago on the Durango Herald's website, and 5 minutes ago it had 372 reactions on Facebook. It had 49 shares. It had 181 comments. And it wasn't posted about on 9R's Twitter. It wasn't posted about on 9R's Facebook feed. It wasn't, again, available in just going to the board meeting and finding out, going to the board's website to find out when this meeting wasn't available. And your public information officer refused to answer questions to the Herald on this obviously hot topic for the college. And so I recommend that if our public information officer doesn't have time to answer questions to the media on such an important issue, that the board find funds to retain its own public information officer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to give up on last names, okay?
Huh.
Steve
Tidwell.
Tidwell.
Steve Tidwell, address is 1140 Carbon Junction number 5. I apologize for not having my thoughts composed more coherently. I found out about this about an hour ago. I've been a district employee for 5 years at 2 different locations, both Maria Mesa Elementary and now at Escalante Middle School. I own firearms. I was taught by my grandfather how to shoot firearms, and I have them in my home. In my home, not my place of work, and especially not in an educational setting. I believe that our core values are to present a welcoming and safe environment. I believe that having district employees carry handguns would be a detriment to that end. We are an evidence-based district that makes decisions based off of sound research and experts within their field. All of the evidence and the research shows that increasing the amount of weaponry within schools would lead to more incidents of shooting, accidental or not. I'm going just based off of what I read in the Herald, but it said that there were intended to have one-day training, 24 hours worth of training. I presume that in the wisdom of the school board, you guys would not retain the use of an electrician after 1 day's training. Yes? In your homes or professionally. I would expect that you guys would show the exact same wisdom whenever you're asking people to perform the impossible in an environment such as schools. There's been several other cases. In Kansas, there were insurance companies that would refuse to insure employees because of a push to arm employees. If insurance companies themselves see the danger inherent in increasing the number of firearms within a setting, I would hope that we would as well. I hope that you guys would show prudence in this matter. I hope that you guys would show an understanding of our mission and make the correct decision to perhaps allocate more of our budget toward retaining SRO officers, to be redundant of the acronym, in our schools permanently. If the need for firearms is seen to be that great, then we should value the work of our SROs and fund them. I appreciate you guys for your time. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maya Kane.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maya Kane. I live at 3602 Silverton Ave, and thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight. I'm here because I too read the Durango Herald article not an hour ago, and I was incredibly distressed. To me, the hallmark of a democracy and a democratic process is notice and a meaningful opportunity to comment. And I feel like we are being denied that by the lack of information that's been publicly available and really readily available and meaningfully available to parents like me. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. I will not enroll my children in a school where guns are present. The U.S. Department for Education in 2012 said arming civilians in a school is not a sound security practice. The American Federation of Teachers has come out against arming security officers and teachers in schools. I would hope that you would give us all the opportunity to be fully informed as we deserve. I'm here representing 12 moms tonight who I was able to reach by phone in the last hour, who are incredibly distressed but are at home making dinner for their children and are not able to be here. So I hope that you will take our comments and understand that they should be amplified, because if we had the chance to be here, we would be here in mass. And I hope that you will really take your time and very carefully consider this incredibly grave decision. And I thank you for putting the security and the safety of our children first.
Thank you.
Tim Walsworth.
Tim Walsworth. I live at 1880 West 2nd Avenue. This is Harrison. He goes to Needham, first grade. And I just want to say, I think you guys need to take a little more time on this decision. I kind of pride myself on trying to follow what's going on around here, but I was not aware of this. And look at the attendance here tonight. And this is going to be a topic that's going to garner a lot of input. And so for whatever reason, the public was not aware of this opportunity to speak tonight. And I would urge you to take more time to get more input. You guys are good at that. You're good at communicating. I read all the emails and all the emails, all that stuff. So please take more time. My personal thought is I'm not in favor of having him in a room with a gun, honestly. I know people aren't going to agree with me. Other people are going to feel differently. But I would just urge you guys, take more time to get more input and don't rush this decision, please. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harrison.
Maria Doucette.
My name is Maria Doucette, and I am also Harrison's mother. I found out about this meeting. I live at 1880 West 2nd Avenue, and I found out about this meeting because I got an email from the Durango Herald at 4 p.m. today. So I left work and came directly here. I am rather upset about the idea of having a gun in my child's school. Having an armed teacher or a few armed officers in a high school as big as DHS, a gunman can go ahead and kill 40, 50 people before that person ever even addresses it. A few teachers with a handgun is not going to fight somebody with an AR-15. We need to be addressing bigger things in this nation than putting someone in the school with a gun. You could take that money that you're using to train these officers, and you could have airport-style entrances at the schools if that's how you want to do it. But do not put more guns to fight guns. It shows it doesn't work. We need evidence-based solutions, not fairy tales. I have buried a child. I never want to bury a child again, and I don't want to bury a child because my kid accidentally is shot by a teacher. If this is put in, I will reconsider my child's attendance in Durango School District.
Thank you. Diane Cassidy.
Hi, Diane Cassidy. I live at 952 East 3rd Avenue. I was a substitute in the school system for 10 years and 5 years as a para at the high school. I have not been employed with the school district for 6 years. When I was working at the high school, the subject of arming teachers or staff members came up numerous times, and we were queried upon our opinion at that time. I don't know what the atmosphere has been like in the last 6 years. I know that school violence has escalated. I have a daughter that works in the Boulder School District, and she had a hell of a year this past year. I do not agree with having school personnel hired security with guns. I'm not sure what the cost would be, how many per school. Benefits is a huge issue. Teachers can't even pay their own health insurance right now. I would rather see that money go towards hiring more school teachers, mental health professionals for the schools. I didn't intend to speak tonight, but seeing the turnout really upsets me. I happened to look at the Herald online this afternoon, and it just posted the article. This shows me that there has not been enough public input into this area. I don't know how the teachers and staff members in the district are feeling right now, and how much they have been questioned as to their opinions. None of that has been made public. If it has been addressed, I just feel that you need to step back and not make a vote tonight on yes or no, period, on this issue. I think there needs to be a lot more public information put out there of what you are proposing and how the community feels about that. Our police department can't even fulfill all of their positions, and their trained officers. Currently, a school security officer at our school district only needs a high school diploma. I don't feel that our current personnel should be hired guns. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I interject something? Two of us, when we read the agenda, we're going to actually work on tabling the actual decision for the reasons of this. So we are intending to at least vote to table the decision itself. We are going to get a presentation that you're invited to stay for right after we get the public participation. But we were already, when we looked at the agenda, two of us said we were probably going to work to table it. So we understand that there needs to be a lot of input. And that's what we understand it needs to be collected, and we understand that, doing it on the same day is probably not going to work out. And we didn't even need to read the Herald to know that we needed a table. Right. So we probably will, most likely will do that, to table the decision until our next meeting to get the feedback. So.
And I'd like to, where are you? You're Molly. We would never make a decision based on public opinion. Public opinion is important, though. So there needs to be a combination of what do people want based on whatever reasons they have, plus real data and evidence. And that's why, like Mick said, even though it's on the agenda, we most of us didn't plan. Well, we planned on not actually making the vote. We can't make a decision yet. We need more time, more input, more information. But we do encourage you to stay for the safety report, because there's been a safety committee for a couple of years now. It has consisted, well, they'll tell you, but consisted of staff and parents and professionals and different people who've looked at the whole big picture of safety, not just guns. And that might be why you haven't heard about guns, because it was part of many items. And the Herald, I guess, did us a favor by going ahead and printing it, and I willingly was interviewed by them, because it is something so important, and we don't take it lightly.
Thank you for your response to me about that. And just going to respond to you, I feel that the Herald did the public a favor, and that's why part of the end of my comment was about the school's responsiveness to the media when they want to ask those questions.
And that's why I took the interview. She called me at, 2 o'clock, something like that? And I went ahead and took it because we are public. We are elected by all of you. We are responsible to you, and we're we're in charge of your children and the safety, so we have to cut this, I have to cut this short, but
I want to reiterate, I can't speak for all the other board members, but I was planning to table this for the very reason that it has to go out to the community, not to see what the popular vote is, but to have the discussion and to be transparent as board members that we're all parents, we all serve because we have the same focus that you do on our students and our community. Sarah, Dan, we probably don't have this standards.
It's on the agenda item for
Right.
public consumption.
So again, we would encourage you to stay because we'll be going over a lot more information. But it was my intention to table this for the very reasons that you all are bringing up, understandably and deservedly.
so I have some more people. Would you still like to say something? I'll call your name. If you'd still like to come on up. We'll give you the time we need. Yes.
I'm just saying yes, I'd like to come up.
Okay. Well, I've got several here. The next one I have here is Erica.
There you go.
Perfect.
So I won't address a lot of the other issues people, sorry, my name's Erica Brown. I live at 16 Artisan Court. I'm the mom of 2 elementary-aged children. Like everyone else, I was really upset about the notice, and I appreciate you letting us know that because we don't know all those things. I'm still a little bit confused about why it's on the agenda if most of you want to table it and seem surprised by it as well. So I hope that there's more of a backstory to this, but from a public perspective, I've lost a lot of credibility in this group by not putting more notice out to the community that this was being discussed and what the evidence is that you're considering and creating that dialogue. And it sounds like maybe you are going to do that, but I'm still confused as to why it was on the agenda for today to vote on it if that was never the intention. So it does seem to me as an outsider that someone was trying to sneak it through. And I'd like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, so I hope that's not the case.
I'd like to respond a little bit. It was kind of like, if we're really thinking about doing this for next year, it needed to be voted on now, so there was time to prepare for it. So it was kind of like, oh my gosh, maybe we better put it on the agenda and at least talk about it and decide if we're going forward or not, so that we can plan for next year.
There was also a question from the board as to what would need to occur. We have a community group out there, Parents for Safer Schools, who have been lobbying hard for the board to consider this. The board's request was what has to be done if the board ever decided to do this. And so that's what's contained within that item is what there is an email from CASB, which is Colorado Association of School Boards, that states statute. There's a resolution that is a resolution they provide, which is a resolution attached to that item. So it really was intended to educate the board about what they would need to do when they decided, or if they ever decided to do so. Again, we've had a safety committee for 2 years working on this, and it's been a conversation for many parents and that safety group for a considerable amount of time is if the district were to arm, should we, and who? And so what you'll hear, if you can stay for the safety presentation, is you'll hear if the district ever considered it, the very limited scope and the qualifications that would be required. It would not be teachers. Our insurance company would not allow us to arm teachers. That is not something that any insurance provider is going to cover. The scope of what the board had considered looking at was a very finite scope, of which we have one individual in the district right now that might qualify. So again, if you can stay, we can certainly provide you more detail, which is that backstory that you're looking
Is that
for.
going to become public for all the people that can't be here tonight?
It's actually all attached to the agenda.
We will make sure that there is
So I guess as a parent, I would really encourage you to communicate what this process is and think about the process, not just like, oh, if we're going to do it this year, we need to vote on it. It's like, well, if we need to vote on it tonight to be able to do it next year, then maybe we shouldn't do it next year or even consider it for next year, because this is a decision that has such massive consequences for our community that I would like to hear from the teachers and the administrators and the students and everyone else as well.
You should know that we got this information over the weekend. Did we
Friday.
get this resolution
Thursday.
on Friday?
Thursday.
on Thursday. So we have not had a great deal of time, and we have all had concerns.
But
So it's not like we've had this for a month and we've been keeping it from the public eye.
But to your answer, why is it on the agenda tonight?
Yeah.
When you run a meeting, in order to have, if you're having a report, you don't need a motion. But if you're going to have an exchange of ideas and discussion, you need to have a motion on the floor.
My understanding was that it was a vote, right?
A
Whether or
motion
not we're
means a
gonna-
vote, yeah. But the vote doesn't have to be for it
Or against.
Right.
just
or
table it.
against it.
Or just
But
say,
you
we'll talk
need a
about it.
motion to open the discussion.
Right, you can't even talk about it unless you have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
So that enabled us to begin to have that conversation.
That's why it looks like we're voting, well, that's why we are voting on
We're gonna
it.
vote on something.
But it doesn't mean
It's going to
what
be
the
a yes.
result of the vote will be. It's one of those things about, have you ever seen the book Robert's Rules?
Robert's Rules
Don't
of Order.
bother, don't bother.
Yeah, I've served on boards.
But this is part of how to run a meeting effectively and efficiently. And if you're just talking forever and ever about something, you don't go anywhere, you don't get through the meeting, you don't accomplish anything. So that's why we need the motion. Okay?
Okay. I just want to say a couple of quick things. I learned tonight that there is a Colorado State Legislative Working Group that's studying this issue specifically for the state. So I would also urge our community to wait until their working group comes out with their recommendations for the state. I don't know what the stage of that they're in. I just learned of that tonight. And then I would also really urge you all to look at the evidence behind this and really focus on what evidence is out there and what risks are there, because it doesn't seem as though there's much precedent and the unexpected consequences could be incredibly dangerous. I personally would be absolutely terrified to send my 2 children to school where there were guns in the school and would probably pull them out of the 9R school district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Himes?
Hello, John Heiss, 97 Rio Vista Circle. I come as both a parent of students in 9R and as an employee of 9R. And I guess the first thing I would say is that appearances are important. And at this point, regardless of Robert's Rules of Order, regardless of all those things, like my wife is reading the paper. I got home from my other job and I'm hanging out. And she's like, hey, did you know they're voting on guns tonight in school? And I'm like, no, because we haven't, like, I'm an employee and a parent. And I have not heard anything about that at all. And so the immediate response was, well, maybe we ought to get in the car and come down here. And here I am. So I'm just, you can hang your head, you can do all those things. Appearances are important. Regardless of why it shows up at this point, it does come across as something that, I don't know, a huge decision like this. And whatever the decision is made by you in the end was based upon data and all that stuff, fine. But it needs to be presented to the public prior to this moment. And at this point, it really feels like, I don't know, damage control. And it's great that you'll be seeing a school safety security update. Maybe that's what should have been on instead. I don't know. I have faith in you. I have trust in you. Please use that.
Thank you. Thank you. God damn it.
Okay, switching gears.
Is that everybody?
Wait, no, there's one there. Because there's a different subject now. Robin? Oh, no, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. It is the same.
Thank you for letting me have a couple of seconds here.
Sure.
I'm Robin Haller, and I live at 2709 Delwood, and I am the local group leader for Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety in America. And I urge you as a school board to be leaders of our community and not to make decisions based on fear. I know that this is going to be an elongated process, which I appreciate, but I want to make sure that we are using the same standard that we use for, choosing curriculum, for example. We use evidence-based practices always. And we need to make sure that we're going back to the research and the evidence, no matter all of the emotion that's going to get involved in this. And I know that from both sides, there's a lot of emotion because it's our kids' safety that's at stake. So you have a lot in your hands, and I realize that, and I want to honor that in the same breath, that you guys have a lot on your shoulders as a school board, but I urge you to be leaders and not to make a decision based out of fear, to make evidence-based decisions regarding having armed staff in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all of the forms I have. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak? Thank you. We really, really appreciate you coming, making the effort. Some of you had to scramble to get here. I appreciate that, and we do hear you, and we will proceed accordingly. We will do it right.
6B.
Superintendent's report.
Yep, so 6B, we're going to go to school safety and security update. Kathy, would you join me up here? I have asked Sarah to display. This is attached to the agenda as well in that resolution. I'm going to jump forward because I know there are a number of parents here and community members specifically interested in that, and it certainly is part of a safety and security update. One of the challenges that I think all school districts across the country, certainly we have a pretty vast array of opinions across our nation. I think one of the biggest challenges as an elected official is trying to listen and honor all of that. And how do you honor that without offending people who might have different points of a view? I think our desire has always been to listen, to hear evidence, and then ultimately to deliberate. And so if you have a chance when you go home and you look at our board docs, you'll see this document, Armed School Security Officer Standards. One of the things that in early conversations, as this topic has repeatedly been brought up by parent groups out in our community about the fact that we don't have enough people who are armed and trained in the community, is our board was very strong on the fact that we will not arm just anyone. That is not something that the board would ever consider. Teachers have enough on their plate. The last thing they need to do is worry about how to be trained to carry a weapon. We also believe the same for any of our support staff. This document is produced through a variety of different sources, and really what it's looking at is people who are employed in a school district as a security officer who meet the same standards in essence as a police officer, someone who's gone through the same training, someone who's met the same qualifications as a police officer, someone who continues to meet those qualifications, meaning it's not a one and done and I'm in. It's something that someone has to continue to show that they're competent. And so this is the only standard by which I would recommend to our board ever even consider. And again, as you've heard tonight, it's not something that we believe is something we should rush into. When we surveyed the community last school year, we did ask about arming our community. A third of our community said yes. In fact, they said yes, arm everyone. 2/3 of our community said no. And really, what we've been doing as a safety task force has been working is saying, is there ever a time when a school security or a school staff member might be appropriate to be armed? And that question's unanswered, but it is the question that we're continuing to try to gather evidence on. So this is being presented tonight to the board to just provide, if we were ever to recommend or recognize an individual staff member or a small group of staff members, what would be the requirement? It would not be go to the range and show you can shoot and then you get to carry a gun. It would be basically the very same training as a police officer. I will share that this coming year we are adding another police officer at district expense. We have hired another SRO. We're in the process of working with our new police chief on selection. So that is a step that was taken, that was supported in the community survey last year of increasing the number of law enforcement personnel in our building. So we will next year hopefully start the year with 3 school resource officers in the city limits and 2 school resource officers in the county limits. That is what is in place for next year. This would be something that would enhance that, would be something that if the board ever decided it was appropriate, this would provide guidelines by which they would be able to consider doing so. So that's an update on security guards. This year we've expanded our security guard staff. We now have 4 at the high school. We have 1 that Pueblo Community College has hired, so that's actually 5 at the high school. We have 1 at both middle schools. Those did not exist 2 years ago. We've added that security staff just in the last 2 years. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to provide an update on this safety panel. I will say, since there are so many impassioned people in the audience, know that we're looking for continued voices on that committee. So if you're interested in being a voice on that safety and security task force, please make sure that Kathy has your name and contact information before you leave tonight. So sorry, shameless pitch, but Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you, Dan. I'll leave my business card on the back table for any of those in the audience that might want to inquire about our safety task force team. First, I want to say thank you for bringing me back this year to have another discussion about arming our security staff, if possible. And if this is just purely a discussion, clearly this is an emotional topic, and it's hard to make an executive decision around an emotional topic. You may not know this, but I did speak last summer to the Ignacio School Board with my concerns about arming staff down there. So, and when I met with the education, it's the union following Parkland, I spoke with them very clearly. The only thing I want to arm them with is knowledge, how to respond in a crisis. That is clearly the only thing that I think in the classroom our teachers need, is knowing how to respond when there's an emergency effectively and efficiently to keep themselves and their students safe. That's my role. I take that pretty seriously. So what I wanted to give you this evening is an update on this last school year. We did some really great things around emergency preparedness and safety. We created this school safety task force team following our town hall meetings that we had, following, of course, the Parkland shooting. We have 22 members, 8 of them coming from parents, 4 of them coming from community members, which include law enforcement and fire. Some of them hold dual roles as a parent as well as an agency representative. We also had 8 folks coming from the school district, and from administration, of course, myself included as the chair, and then we had 1 school board member. I think that was really important. We had about 200 hours of meetings this last year, and we took various field trips. So we went out to the schools. They were involved in a lockdown, so they could see what that looked like. They were at one of our schools to see what the pickup and drop-off looked like. We actually went to a school district in our county that has some security measures at their front door, and we did a field trip and looked at that, as well as looking at their video surveillance. It was very informative. We also had our canine detection handler come in with his dog, and our safety task force team got to meet with him and hear about the program and also ask some questions. Really trying to be transparent, so if anybody in the audience would like to join this task force, we'll be continuing our work through the school year again. Each of our schools conducted about 10 safety drills, 1 a month as we move forward through the school year, and they had safety team meetings. And each school has a safety team, just so you know, and they have for several years. Our Safe to Tell program has been very, very well used. There were 276 tips that came into the region. 130 of them were Durango 9R tips, most of them coming from our secondary schools. So as you can imagine, 26 of those were for suicide ideation, 14 depression, 14 for bullying, and 13 for drugs. Now this is an anonymous tip line, if you'll remember, that was created for Colorado kids following the Columbine shooting that happened up there back in 1999. Some of the other highlights, we implemented our visitor management system into our schools, mostly well received. It took some education and awareness, but I think at the end of the year, our staff and our parents were very appreciative of the process. It's something new, so it's going to take a few more years before I think it's going to be fully embraced. We staffed, as Mr. Snowberger said, we have 5 security specialists plus 2 security specialists 2. So we have 2 retired law enforcement have come to us that want to fulfill a, pay it forward, if you will, to work in our schools and the help and protection of our kiddos on campus and staff. We were awarded a SAFER grant, which SAFER is an acronym for Schools Access for Emergency Response. This is actually a grant that Senator Quorum had proposed and was able to get the JBC, the Joint Budget Committee, to fund $30 million for interoperability. So we recognize that communication can be our first stumbling block, as we know in day-to-day life anyway, but in an emergency. And so our handheld radios that we've deployed in our district since 2008, we now have the software, hardware to connect to the 800 megahertz system that our law enforcement emergency responders carry. So think about the kid who maybe falls on the playground unconscious, get on the radio, and you're actually able to speak to emergency services en route to the school instead of them showing up looking for where is the incident, and being able to talk through and show up right at the scene if needed. So we received $521,000 for this interoperability grant that will be spread across all of our school campuses, including our transportation department, because that's important too, to communicate with them. That grant opened on November 26th and closed on December 3rd, so it was a short window. So I feel pretty lucky that we were able to get funded. And then shortly after that, a few days later, another grant opened up for us, which is called the Dispersement Grant. Senator Neville is the one that presented it to the legislation. That was a one-time money that came out of the long bill, and it was $30 million again. And the application was kind of vague, so when I called and asked, what do I ask for? They said, ask for anything and everything. And so what I reflected on was the assessment that we had conducted the year before from the Isaiah systems that came in and did a third-party look at our campus to really give us that objective view of what are our gaps, what are we missing, what can we shore up, and really recognize in our community of who we are. We're not DPD or DF, we're not Denver Public Schools, we're not LA Unified, we're Durango. And so they really took that fresh look for us. And so I was able to write that grant with some of the bigger glaring gaps that I thought we had, such as our analog bus system, radio system. Is just so Stone Age that it was important to bring it into the 21st century with digital radios. So we got an award for that. We're going to put more ballistic film on the corridor windows of our classroom. We heard from teachers saying that they were concerned about those windows and the doors of their classroom from the corridor. So we're going to put ballistic film on that. Probably the biggest ask that I gave to the state was for training. So I asked for training for staff, students, parents in our community about school safety. That's the number one thing I asked for, because I think that it's all about the mindset. We all need to do this together. School safety is not just my responsibility, not just your responsibility, not just the communities. It's all of us in keeping our kids safe at school so they can learn and so our teachers can teach. That's their job. And so I take my job pretty seriously that way. So I know that changing the mindset in a fashion that fits us and where we need to be. Obviously, arming staff at this point has roused a lot of emotion, which is good. This is healthy. We need to have this conversation to talk about what are some of the things we really need to be concerned about. So we're going to put some door sensors on our high school doors that are, on the outside so we can make sure we know who's coming in the building. That's a concern. We saw that up at Arapahoe High School, that young man got into a side door. So that's a concern. So we're going to continue to look at some of these doors that don't have those sensors on it. I'm going to skip down through, we're going to build 2 vestibules. So we're going to do a pilot project with this money and build out 2 security vestibules at 2 of our elementaries, one at Animas Valley and one at Needham Elementary. It's really important. We need to build out these vestibules at all of our schools.
I can just, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. The vestibule, both of those schools you can actually access. If you come through the front doors, you can get 2 classrooms before you're ever seen by someone in the administration or administrative offices. So we're highly concerned about the design of those schools. Yes, we have buzzer systems on the door, but sometimes people come in through those buzzers when someone else comes in. And so we're really concerned about providing, especially in those two schools first, an entrance that allows visitors to be seen and engaged before they can actually get to a classroom, which is a concern in those two buildings, but in all of our buildings to a greater degree, or to some degree or another. But certainly those two buildings are what we believe to be the greatest security risk, and the safety and security team made those decisions in consultation with law enforcement. Also, we have response time challenges, not at Needham as much as at Animas Valley, where they're a county school on the north side of the county when all of the services are based on the south side of the county. Getting someone there in an emergency could be a delay, and so that was the other justification for that building, not only the current design, but response time. So it would basically be reconstructing the entrance so that the office has engagement with anyone who comes in those front doors before they could ever get into the classroom areas.
So moving forward, we'll be doing a lot of professional development training offerings, not only to our staff, but our community, our parents, as well around school safety and security. So please look forward to hearing some things out of my office and invites, if you will, to these trainings. We're going to solidify some of our MOUs, which is a memorandum of understanding with our community members for parent reunification sites for our schools in the event that we should ever have to do a parent reunification. So these are things that I'm looking forward to working on. Student IDs and staff IDs, we're going to continue with our smart cards for our staff, but also for our students, and asking them to wear them.
That is something we'd love the board to weigh in on, is we have not required students to display their ID. And when you look at some of the challenges that have occurred in other high schools where violence has taken place, to start thinking about, because we would need to make a decision, certainly if we're going to implement that, we're going to need to make a decision relatively soon. So that's not as big as whether we arm someone or not, but it is something I'd love for the board members to do some thinking about. And certainly maybe something we want to get community feedback on.
So I guess the last thing I want to say is that I clearly don't have all the answers, okay? I'm in this for the long haul. I'm in this for the kids and the staff. Please know that I'm searching after evidence-based programs, because I think someone mentioned that, and that's true. There clearly are none out there that are purely evidence-based at this point. So we're on a road, and we're on this road together to ensure the safety of our schools. So I appreciate your time, your effort, and any questions you might have.
I have one more thing I want to expound on, if I could. Did you talk about the digital radio? Did you talk about it? Okay. I didn't know if you talked about it, and if you talked about it to the point that because that is something that's about to be installed. So those will be installed this summer. So, okay, sorry.
Yes. The vestibules, oh, by the way, the vestibules won't, we're in the planning process. Those will not go into construction until next school year.
Summer of 2020.
So, thank you.
What's been almost a full year of the Raptor system, or the
visitor
management system. Do you have any reflections on how that year has gone, and do you have any different ways that you're going to be implementing it for this coming year?
So I think it was a little tough at first. It was an education for not only our front office staff to manage another task, but I think they tell you today that it was actually a lot easier over time. Some were using a sign-in sheet that was pretty cumbersome, or they really couldn't tell me who was in the building when we had to do a fire evacuation. So this system has streamlined that. I think our parents have come along, but it was definitely uphill at the very beginning. Mm-hmm.
Are there any changes for next year?
No.
Okay.
I think we'll try to keep it the same without introducing, I mean, there's some more features that we can use for like volunteers, that type of thing, or for staff. We might consider some of that, but for parents, it's going to remain the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one of my concerns that I think I raised at some time before when you were up here was the idea of possibly some groups feeling like if they didn't have legal status in the U.S., feeling comfortable coming forward. And you said you were going to kind of in the summer possibly revisit a conversation with, like, say, compañeros or somebody who might have a better finger on that pulse than us, to see if there's been any reflections they might have and how the process has been. Do you think that you could do that this summer to kind of check in with Mark?
I'd be happy to. Yes, absolutely.
I'm good.
Are we going to talk about the armed school security officer standards tonight?
On that item, on the agenda?
That's another item. That's a separate item.
It's actually attached to this.
Yeah, I attached it to this when it became clear we were going to have an audience because we wanted to be able to share that.
So when
It's on
does
both
this,
items.
when does this get talked about?
That's in the
It's
agenda
8E.
item on enhanced security measures.
Yes, the vote's not.
Okay,
Oh,
it's,
okay. Okay.
There's been let's finish with her.
Or
I mean, we could certainly talk about it now.
Well,
Typically
we're
during,
thinking about changing the order so the audience doesn't have to hang around through.
no, make them listen to the budget
If
stuff.
we have to be here. Now, I would just like to say, I'm really glad to hear the balance between prevention and intervention. The prevention as far as facilities and security of our buildings,
education.
but also the social emotional for students. That's so critical in this. If we can, stop a kid from feeling the need to do something, and putting the effort into training teachers how to deal better and recognize things like that. I mean, you can't prevent everything, but the more we prevent, the less we're going to have to intervene, and intervention is messy. So I'm really glad to hear that. Stephanie, did you have anything?
No, I would support, the audience should know we put, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last 18 months into social emotional behavior and added counselors. So we're very aware that it's not really even a fine balance. It's a matter of how do we best support students to meet all of those needs. It's not about, we know for a long time, it's not just about academics. So we are trying to look at the whole child and what this whole child needs and put those interventions in. We work pretty closely with other mental health organizations in town in terms of suicide and prevention and how, guns are related to that.
would encourage community members to read the items on the agenda, just because I think, it's easy to react to what we read, but I would encourage that you look at the attachments on the agenda and look at the wording of the items, because I think that will give you some facts around where the board was tonight versus maybe how it was reported. So just want to share that.
Mr. Superintendent, can we interject the action item for here so that we can?
Absolutely.
All right.
We're breaking rules tonight.
Oh,
I know you don't want.
No, we're modifying. That's why I made it sound like
this
Mr.
is where,
Superintendent and all that
it's
good
really
stuff.
important
So-
for us to be sensitive to the needs
So-
of, especially people here tonight.
So 8E.
Yeah, I'm going to be the one who
Sure.
makes the motion to actually
okay.
say it that we're going
All
to
right.
discuss this.
Okay.
Go, Nick.
I move that the board approve the attached resolution providing enhanced school building security. Then-
If nobody seconds it, it dies.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, then we won't discuss it. So
Right.
I think we should go
We
ahead
should
and second
discuss
it.
it. Then I'll second it.
All right.
So what this is doing is it's opening up the ability for us to discuss the actual
Resolution.
resolutions and then decide yes, no, or postpone.
Most likely take.
And Sarah, could you try to post the Armed School Security Officer Standards
What number is
piece
that?
for us, please?
8B? E.
Yeah. Or should we post the this is,
resolution.
I think this is more important,
Yeah, so
actually.
let's go with this.
Because this is what would be required for us to,
Yeah.
so maybe give people a little bit of time to,
Do we want to read out the background?
I don't think so.
Want me to read this?
The background on.
On ratification of art, no, that's.
On the page where
8C.
it gives you the background from CASB, that's further down.
E. It's not on E. Well,
Keep scrolling. We're down here.
is it on this one or is it up?
Wasn't it?
Enhanced security measures. Yeah, scroll down here. Yeah, there you go.
This one here.
I got it, it's up.
Oh, you got it.
Okay.
We could just go with questions that we
Yeah.
have so that.
Nick made the motion, so let's let him begin.
Yeah, so this is the CASB, which is the Colorado Association of School Boards. This is what their background information, so we'll just read it out loud since it's hard to see. Colorado law allows a person with concealed carry permit, quote, who is employed or retained by contract by a school district or charter school as a school security officer to carry a concealed handgun into real property or into any improvement erected therein of an public elementary, middle, or junior high or high school while the permittee is on duty. And then it has a reference number. The understanding is that there are approximately 10 to 15 school boards in Colorado that have designated a district administrator as a, quote, school security officer. Most have done so by board resolution, not policy. In general, the boards that have chosen to arm personnel are in remote rural areas where the response time for law enforcement is a significant challenge. The Colorado legislature yet again killed a bill this year that would have authorized persons with concealed carry permits to carry guns on school property. A few years ago, I assume this is the superintendent, met with the general counsel of the Colorado School District Self-Insurance Pool, as well as an attorney from Kaplan and Ernest, all agreed that it is preferable to approach the issue via board resolution instead of a policy. Craig Henn, the current general counsel of this organization, agrees that this issue doesn't fit well with the policy. So SysDip has developed the attached document to help guide the process and inform decision making. If the district has its insurance coverage through SysDip, you might want to reach out to Craig for further guidance or assistance. There's an email address. Then I'm going to go ahead and just read the resolution at this point so people understand what we're doing or looking at.
Sir, could you put the resolution up so that they could look at that?
Yeah, and I'll just read it out loud anyway, though. Resolution of the Board of Education of Durango School District 9R in Durango, Colorado, declaring its official intent to permit employees of the district to be designated as security officers and authorized to carry concealed firearms on school property as permitted by law. Whereas Colorado law allows a person with a concealed carry permit, quote, who is employed or retained by contract by a school district or charter school as a school security officer to carry concealed handgun into the real property or any improvement therein of a public elementary, middle, junior high, or high school while permittee is on duty. I'm not going to read the numbers at this time. Whereas the school superintendent and his team have been engaged in reviewing and strengthening safety and security of its campuses for the past decade and continues to seek ways preventing any act of violence or threat to staff and students of the district. And whereas the superintendent and safety coordinator of safety and security have provided the board criteria of which individuals will be designated as, quote, security officers who meet the high standards and are trained and prepared to possess a firearm while on duty. And whereas the board feels that such an action is one way of contributing to the safety and security of our students and staff while on campus, and whereas the superintendent has added appropriate coverage to the general liability insurance policy of the district, and whereas the superintendent will notify the board when an employee has made the qualifications prior to permitting the carry of a concealed weapon on campus, as well as notify the board when an individual loses such eligibility, and whereas the superintendent and his staff and his team will work closely with law enforcement when an employee is authorized to carry a firearm while on campus to ensure awareness and coordination. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Durango School District 9R Board of Education does hereby authorize the superintendent to proceed with plans to identify employees who meet the requirements and maintain their qualifications to be determined eligible for designation as a security officer according to Colorado revised statutes. Then there's the date of adoption that probably won't happen on the 17th of June, most likely. Do you want to comment on this, Mr. Superintendent?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things we tried to do, this is the resolution that CASB provided us that's been used by other districts. One of the things that was we tried to reflect in here based upon individual conversations with board members, needless to say, was no, we're not interested in arming just any staff member. That law allows someone to be designated by the district as a school security officer, not school security guard, school security specialist. It's a school security officer. Also that that would be that the criteria would be proven to you and that you would be notified before. So this policy or this resolution was modified to try to meet some of the conversations that have happened in the past, just to give you a sample or an example of what a resolution might look like should you move forward. I'd say the most important document is the Armed School Security Officer Standards, because that's really the standards upon which certainly it would be the only standards I would recommend if you were to consider such an action, that those individuals are not just anyone who's gone to basic gun training, but that they meet these high bars. And again, when you look at this, these expectations are what is expected of a law enforcement officer. So again, that's just for your consideration and something that provides you a model of what would occur should you at any point in the future decide you'd be interested.
Can you highlight those security standards? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily for us because we read it, but mm-hmm. for the folks.
Sure. Oh,
that's a question. Go ahead and highlight those standards.
Oh, certainly. Armed school security officers are defined as school employees who are authorized to carry firearms on school premises to protect the safety of students and staff. ASSOs must meet the following criteria: be designated or recognized by your governing school board as an armed school security officer and has primary duty and responsibility to guard, deter, and detect, comply with local state requirements to carry a weapon and has received specialized training in the handling of their weapon on campus, receive ongoing professional development and training at minimum on an annual basis that shall include firearm safety, operational tactics, legal responsibilities, and duties. ASSOs must also meet our training requirements and must meet the annual requalifications as outlined in these standards to remain on our insurance policy. Periodic review of documentation will be required. Documentation will be maintained by Durango 9R showing that it meets the minimum standards. It's important to note that the Armed School Employee Insurability Standards may be modified over time on a legislative or exposure changes. Training requirements include, and this is the insurance standards, they have to comply with local and state requirements. They must complete a minimum of 24-hour firearm training within the last 12 months. That includes 4 hours of classroom instruction to include firearm safety, use of deadly force, legal principles, and weapons retention in the school environment. 6 hours of live fire range training. Exercises, fire range training should include active shooter training concepts. At the conclusion of the fire range practice, participants must be able to pass peace officer standards and training or post-shooting range requirements. 6 hours of school active shooter training. Annual requalifying requirements must comply with local state requirements to carry a weapon. Candidates must annually complete a minimum of 16 hours of training following completion of a 24-hour firearms training required above. That includes 8 hours of live fire range training and recertification per post requirements, and 8 hours of school active shooter training.
Okay, we'll open up for questions and discussion.
Can I make a
Sure.
suggestion? Let's discuss the move to table. If you go ahead and make that motion to table, and then we'll discuss that.
Can we, after we
We
table, if
can't,
we
but
table?
we have two
I don't-
motions on the, we can't have two
All right.
motions on the
I thought if we moved to table it since it's within the motion, I thought.
I think we'd have to defeat this motion
Okay,
and vote
all
to
right,
table.
okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and discuss.
Okay, so you want to begin?
Sure. Okay, so
Pardon me, Marianne, will you pull the microphone closer? Thank you.
okay. I have a few questions. I'll just do one and then share the floor and come back. One of them has to do with the asterisk that's like midway through the page and essentially saying that these standards can be modified over time based on legislative or exposure changes. So that's, we can change these standards.
You can change the top. The bottom are standards from the insurability standards. So those standards, we're saying those could change based upon those governing boards. The top standards, we can change at any time. These are standards that are being recommended to you as minimum standards. Should you consider moving forward?
Okay, so that concerns me that it doesn't say like with approval or like there's no check and balance for that, like with board approval or anything of the sort. So it seems a bit like akin to maybe like the professional services, a pretty broad asterisk, if you will, that could allow for changes that maybe we are not as public and transparent as could be.
This is a board action, so only the board can modify it.
So the asterisks.
If we adopted this, it would be our document.
It belongs to
Oh,
us.
I see.
Yeah.
Not the, it's not a, that's where the designation between a policy and a board resolution, so.
Okay.
We have to change it.
Okay, so then built in there, inherent is that it would have to come back through the board. Got it, thanks. That's one of my questions.
Me, nothing. I can talk about it.
Sure.
I don't have anything.
Okay. So I like the fact that you said these are minimum standards, because if I were to vote for this, I would want a higher standard. When this proposal was brought to us, one of the standards was that the person have long-term law enforcement experience. I don't see that here, and I think that that's critical. I'm a little concerned that it says that an armed school security officer is defined as a school employee. That means anybody. I think that's too low a bar. That could be, I understand that there's a lot of hours here. All of these hours are about how to shoot a gun, how to do it, safely and well. There's nothing here about evidence of a person's mental health. No evidence here of any prior convictions on violent offenses or domestic abuse or anything like that. So the fact that it says any school employee is of a major concern. Again, going back to the idea of having a retired or a current law enforcement officer who might be working part-time elsewhere would be a much safer approach.
Can I answer one of those questions? The reason it says school employees is because that's the only ones you would have the authority to designate would be your employees as an armed school security officer. You don't designate whether a police officer can come into the building, so that's why it says school employees. So the only ones you could select from would be your employees. That's why it says school employees,
So
not
it's not
just
saying
any.
any employee, it's saying they
Correct.
become a school employee.
Correct. It would,
Well, that we only have jurisdiction over
Yeah.
a school employee, not over anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's good to know that this is a minimum working document, not what we would, ultimately come up with after, again, talking with the community about this. So I'm glad we're at least getting a few people exposed to what the basics are.
And it definitely could indicate that that person has completed law enforcement academy, has X number of years. I mean, you could add to those standards. These were starting standards that Kathy pulled together at my request to at least give you something to begin the conversation.
Mark? Yeah. I was going to come back. No, I'll go last. No?
Okay.
She wants to do the last word.
So what is the pro-con for having this versus just continuing to work only with police officers who are current police officers?
From the parents who have expressed concerns about our police officers is that they are pulled. They are pulled when a crisis occurs in the community. They leave our buildings. We have currently 3 in-town officers, or will for next year. We've had 2 with, I believe, 5 or 6 in-town schools. And so the concern from the parent group that's really advocated that we consider this motion would be that there are times where there is no one in a building who is armed. And so that's their rationale for saying we should consider something like this.
And is there any workaround with that with the police department?
Only if a police officer right now in Durango proper is $104,000 a year for us to fund. So we could hire 6 police officers at that, but that would kill our budget, which we're about to look at next.
Sure. And so the example you just mentioned that we're having a new police officer that we've just.
Correct.
So is that person now sort of exclusively 9 hours, or is still susceptible to an emergency
No,
to be stepped
part of our conversation has started with that new police officer a year ago. The board was involved in that discussion and that decision to move forward with a 3rd that we would pay for. The other 2 are paid for at city expense. City used to provide 4. They had to cut their budget, so they only provide 2. Our attempt to bring one back is really heavily around our high school, in that when a police officer hits their 40-hour mark, they're done for the week. And we were finding that our school resource officer was hitting that mark sometimes on Wednesday because of investigations that they were having to do in the evenings or after hours that were causing them to actually finish their shift for the week on Wednesday, and then we'd have no law enforcement coverage. So our initial negotiations were around making sure that we had an officer who could backfill that as well as expand services at the other city schools.
I have one more question. Go ahead. And so what is the estimated cost for one of these officers?
This would be no cost other than I think it's a $4,000 insurance, $2,000 on the insurance. So we did check with USI, who's our insurance carrier. They would require a rider that is $2,000. Employees, as we looked at this, would be existing employees that are already in our budget who would meet these qualifications and ultimately be authorized to carry.
And then the trainings that are outlined?
The trainings outlined would probably be through partnership with law enforcement. So post-training and things like that would occur in conjunction with law enforcement.
So law enforcement would cover that.
Anyone who would carry on our campuses, we want law enforcement to know. We don't want one of our employees to be mistaken. And so if we ever did arm somebody, we would want to make sure that law enforcement and that person worked very closely together.
Thank you.
I have to say, before I can get into these documents, I have to be convinced that this is the right way to go. From what I've read, I'm not sure about. I think gut level, this is a great idea. But I think in reality, we need to look at more things. I won't state my whole opinion. I will listen to everybody, and I will really, really be interested in evidence and facts. Some of the facts that I've been reading in the last week or so have not supported something like this. But I'm open, and if there's information out there that I don't have, that I need to have, then I will certainly listen to it and be willing to make a decision based on the whole picture, not just on part of it.
And I might say to the audience, if you feel like you have evidence, pro or con, or anywhere in between on this issue, please feel free. Our board addresses are on the website, and send it to us.
If you want all of us to have it, just start typing in school board and it pops up.
Yeah.
And it comes to all of us.
Yeah.
Also, I'm sure Kathy is gathering information. She may have, but it's always, if you have something you think is important, send it to her and she'll see if she already has it or needs to add to it. Same with Dan.
I think it's important to note this is not the only safety and security. I think you've heard from Kathy tonight.
yeah.
There's an awful lot of things that we're doing. So this is by no means the only means by which we're going to ensure the safety and security of our campuses. It certainly is not something we've done up till this point, and I'm very proud of the fact that we've continue to maintain what I believe are pretty darn safe campuses, and that's speaking as a father as well as a superintendent. So again, it is a discussion that you have had lots of feedback on all sides. I would recommend that we go to some type of a survey at the beginning of the school year that would provide you more details from parents and community members as to this, so that you have more feedback on this. And there's
Also, 2 years ago, we started off all of this with some community meetings. And some of them were specific audiences, like we did one at the high school that was parents and students. And then we had some in the library for other audiences. And maybe we need another round of that, because it's been 2 years you've been gathering information. You know a lot more now than you did then, that you can share with more people. And I think that would be key. Share with them, and then also get feedback from them. I know it adds to your light workload.
That's okay.
But, we can all pitch in, we can all be responsible and do this the right way. Okay, so we need to vote.
Or should we withdraw?
Or the person can withdraw. The person who made the motion can withdraw, right? Or do we need to vote?
You can withdraw.
I'm going to go ahead and withdraw the motion this time.
Second. Or do we second and withdraw?
We don't, if it's withdrawn, we
Probably
don't,
we don't have to.
we don't have to.
So we'll pick it up another time.
Okay.
With lots of community notice.
Yeah.
So I just like to make one final statement, and that is thank you. Continue your courage, because it's all our responsibility to keep schools safe. I'll be back to have this conversation again, not necessarily around the weapons, but around school safety. So please.
That's what I like about your committee. It's the whole picture. It's not just facilities or just weapons or just academics. It looks at the big picture of everything. And we really, really appreciate your knowledge and your guidance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I withdrew the motion. We're not going to vote on it tonight.
It's on more communications and feedback that push and pull.
Thank you all for
Thank
staying
you.
and listening.
Yes.
Thank you. Confusing, and I understand that, and I regret that people heard information or read into that further, but I certainly understand why that occurred. So
We'll make sure that there's plenty of lead time and plenty of warning so that people can have public input.
Is the Herald Julie? Oh, I couldn't find. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. You don't want to hear the budget?
Everybody always leaves.
Thank you all for coming.
Absolutely. We'll
Thank
be
you
talking
very,
about
very
that
much
in
for
new
coming.
business.
I thought
For
we
sure,
could hear
for sure,
that.
for sure.
Are we not broadcasting now? Are we
Mm-hmm.
okay? All right, 6C, I think we're on, aren't we, after all this back and forth? Budget review.
So we're providing this information in advance of the motion item. We did receive a number of questions, and so we felt like we could do those and give you a high-level overview of the budget, and then you do have an item that's a motion item as well in a little bit. So you have a budget in front of you for consideration. This budget has been built throughout the spring. You've seen iterations of it. I would say the most significant change in what you have in front of you tonight compared to previous iterations is that it does list FTE at schools. That was something that we heard both at the public community budget meeting as well as I think the board thought that would be a good idea to know how many people are employed at each school, what are the positions, how many FTE, which is full-time equivalent. So when you think of a teacher who works full-time, they're 1.0. If they work half-time, they're 0.5. So you'll see, for instance, at Animas Valley, there's 20.35 teachers. That means they have some part-time staff who work there. Ultimately, one of the charges that we had from FAC was that we reduce the 88% that originally was in here for salaries and benefits. That 88% has been reduced to 85% in this budget. That was achieved through cuts of open positions. We went to department heads and principals to discuss the fact that our FAC was highly concerned. And because our FAC was concerned, our principals were concerned. The last thing we want to do is face a cliff down the road should a crisis occur. So it was actually an eye-opening experience for our principals to say, well, maybe we should really reconsider this. So we did cut positions. So we are at 85% of the budget. Our goal will continue to be to reduce that over time. And so we'll be looking very carefully at any open positions. What we did not want to do was eliminate people who were already of the impression that they were returning. So we tried to do that strictly through attrition, which is why we were only able to achieve 85% of the cuts. I have a list of questions that I'm happy to go through. I'm also happy to just do a high level of the budget. It's what's the board's pleasure. To be able to get the information you need for the action item.
Well, most of the board went through it pretty carefully, and that's why the questions. If you wanted to do a high-level summary, and then when we come to the questions, maybe some of them can be skipped or whatever, but I think it's important to address the questions that the board felt was important.
Sure.
Were important.
Sure. The high-level summary and then the questions.
Yeah.
So ultimately, we're looking at a revenue of $60,585,000. Again, that's collected through, if you look on page 26, you'll see all of the sources. Property taxes of $21,192,000. Specific ownership tax. Equalization is the state. How they balance what we collect locally and what every school in the state is required to receive. And so you'll see our equalization is much higher than our local property taxes. We're one of those districts that are inverted, being heavily funded by dollars outside of Durango. The expenses, we are expending $58 million in outright expenses. And $2.4 million of transfers for a balanced budget. So we have no spending of fund balance in this budget. We do have a contingency, which is on the other page. Sam, do you know that page number by any chance?
Yeah, it's the other charges page.
65.
Yep, and it's the contingency currently is held within that salary line because that's typically what we do to ensure that if there are additional needs that pop up in the fall due to certain students moving in or kind of an unknown factor, most of the time, because most of our budget's spent in salaries, it's going to be spent in salaries. So right now, as it sits, there's a contingency in that number of about $156,000. And then to another point for Dan, the budget that you see here has brought up our estimate, our best estimate currently of what we'd be sitting at in reserves is 14.5%. So we are still under the 15% by 0.5.
It's pretty close.
We're close. And hopefully, I think that in the fall, again, a lot of this, I mean, we're doing this right now in June, but a lot of this will be a lot clearer in the fall when we actually get kids in seats.
So I'll just touch on some of the questions if that's okay. We'll provide a high-level overview and then certainly ask for more detail if you'd like. There was a question around the repayment plan on the stadium. That stadium repayment plan had always been planned that the Athletics and Activities Department would actually cover the entire payment. Since we started that process. We have actually reallocated $100,000 of PILT money, which is about half of that payment. So PILT is payment in lieu of taxes. The board that committed to the stadium refused to commit taxpayer dollars because taxpayers felt pretty strongly at the time that my dollars are to educate kids, not to build a stadium. I don't want my dollars to go to the stadium. So the board's commitment of not using taxpayer dollars, PILT monies, or monies given by organizations like the tribe, like the Forest Service, offsetting the cost or the loss of tax revenue. So they're dollars that are voluntarily given. They've always gone into capital improvement in the past because they can't go into general fund. If they went into general fund, they'd actually cause the state to give us less money. So they go into capital where we can use it for capital expenses. So every year, in the last 2 years, we've transferred $100,000 from the PILT money in capital projects into the athletics and activities fund. So in essence, we've left $112,000 to actually be raised by the athletic department.
I was just thinking, I think when we first started looking at it, we were saying, oh, this will be for sports, but it'll also be for the music program, for the community and stuff. And that's why I was wondering why it was just athletics.
Yeah, it is primarily athletics and activities. So band is an activity. So all of those organizations that use the field for something or another have skin in that game. So ultimately, it's
Also, even though we could say the athletic director, it's more departments.
activities and athletics are all in interscholastic activities. So
Okay.
it's not just athletics. It's band, it's theater, it's everyone. Now, granted, theater isn't using the field. They're probably not raising money to offset that. But any organization that is, we really want them to leverage their support for the facility that they required. Student Services Triage Center. This is listed as a program. I can tell you it's more an allocation of services. So we're not looking at adding additional people. We're looking at actually reallocating where we use certain people. Our triage center that we've talked about is really a place that when we have a child who's in crisis, and in the past our only solution has been to send them home, that's all we've been able to do. This is actually utilizing current resources where students could be served in an alternate setting while we put a plan into place to try to meet their needs in their home schools. So this sounded like there was an expectation that it was like a program that was being funded. We're pulling existing staff that have skill sets, and they may be pulled at different times to man a center, which really will just be a location where children can be served when they're in crisis so that we don't have to just send them home. Okay.
Will this be an insurance issue?
No, not at all. It's currently what we do. We just do it all across the district instead of concentrating it in one location. Okay. We did have an acronym of OHS that meant to be DHS. I think we did a conversion of a PDF and somehow it changed the D to an O. So thank you for catching that. That was a typo.
I'm sorry, what is
Just
it?
a typo.
It was a typo. OHS instead of DHS. Special education, Sam overestimated 200,000 over its projected budget last year.
So when you look at special education, you're just seeing the general fund side. So there is an additional IDEA, which is the federal side, as well as the state ECEA grant program. In this budget as well, the other component of this that's kind of an interesting little twist is with the reorg of the district, with our chief student services person leaving. A lot of those student service providers are floating up into that special education bucket as well. So there's a reorg happening, additional students, and it's kind of all showing together. Does that make sense?
So
it's a prior year
$22 of general costs is just coming from the general
correct
fund.
It's not total special ed cost, and then a prior year cost.
Student costs are.
And a prior year cost it's not necessarily apples to apples currently because of the way the structure has changed within the organization going forward.
When we took over our administrative unit, one of the things we did do was reinvest. And so we reinvested because at the time of our services being provided by BOCES, our our psychologists and social workers were really restricted to working only with special ed students. We expanded because there are students who are not special ed who need the services of a social worker or a psychologist. The challenge has been that all of those have been coded to special ed, and not all of them are being used 100% for special ed students. And so we spoke with Nancy right before the meeting about our maintenance of effort report. If we report all of that as special ed, then we raise the bar for what the district has to always invest in those services. Not that we would ever not, but we are going to look carefully at what portion of each of those special service providers are being provided to special ed students, code that as special ed, and then code the others as student support services, because that's really their intent, is not to only serve special education students. The increased cost in special ed has been the increased number. I mean, we had 50 to 100 new special ed students in the last year, and that's been a trend. So we see students of higher and higher needs moving into our community. We see sometimes students whose needs are really high moving into our community. And whether that's the word's out that we're doing a great job, or whether it's just that Durango has services and people are choosing Durango, we're not sure why, but we are getting higher and higher need students who require greater and greater supports, which cause greater and greater costs to the general fund. So that is a trend. That's a real trend that you're seeing. And by law, that's our responsibility.
Is the state portion going up on that?
No, a little
The
bit.
Tier B side of it is going up.
And Tier B is a reimbursement side.
Yeah, Tier B is, yeah. And it'll go up approximately, I think, 120,000 or so. So it's going to cover some more salaries next year, which will help.
There's a question about assessments and evaluations are a large cost. No, the people who administer them are the large cost. Psychs and social workers who administer those assessments. Assessments are not a high cost to the district. So it's more of the administration of those, which is human power.
Yeah, but that more assessments.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of my questions. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea that what I'd heard was that children were being sort of moved to assessment, recommendation or referral, more than they had in prior years, more quickly, rather than going through like other stages of sort of like more informal assessment, what have you. And so more students got to the referral stage really quickly, and that required more person power and therefore more staffing than if people had been educated about like the other ways to sort of discern whether or not the student was appropriate for this or maybe something else.
We have a lot of efforts around our MTSS structure where we're working on building consistent practices in every building. I would say that the students who are moving probably more rapidly are because of their needs are so much more rapid. When you have a child who's in crisis, a child whose behaviors are becoming disruptive in the classroom, disrupting the learning of other students, I would say that we're probably expediting students to an assessment range because continuing what we're doing isn't working. It's not working for them and it's not working for other students. So I think there's a combination there. I think you certainly are correct that there may be in some cases, more rapid movement to assessment, but it's because the needs are so significant that continuing to do what we're doing when it's failing is a disservice to the child as well.
Yeah.
So
I think that, like there might be a both and there, and so especially with now having new leadership who maybe might have a different background in terms of special services, that might be a nice opportunity to kind of do.
I would say the triage center is certainly one of those services that will help because we get to a crisis point where we're not being successful with the student. We want to be successful, and their behaviors are really preventing them from accessing what we have to offer. And so having a place that can provide some wraparound support and some assessment while they're there to really think what is the plan for them when they go back to their school so they are successful versus just labeling them, because that's really what you get out of assessment, right? You might gain additional information on how to serve them, but in the end you gain a label which doesn't really change anything that we provide for that student. So. Technology, we invested quite a bit of money last year in building our assistive technology pool, so I don't know if that's what this question was driving at. we continue to invest in technology district-wide, but I will tell you that the Exceptional Student Services Department has really built quite a bank of technical tools that are accessed by students on a checkout basis to see if, in fact, that's the right solution. And so we contributed some donor funds, DEF contributed some funds last year, as well as the district, to really build that bank so that we have technology more readily available to students when they need it.
And then does all technology requests with, say, special ed and say instructional specialists and say coaches, all want a certain technology? Do they all have to funnel through the tech?
All of that technology that I just spoke of is all Exceptional Student Services, so it's all in our Student Support Services Department.
So it hit their budget.
Yeah. So any instructional technology is typically either through our regular replacement cycle when principals work with Mike, our Director of Technology, around we have X amount of computers in your building that need to be replaced. Do you want those replaced, or would you rather invest that in some other fashion? So we have had principals who say, I don't want those 30 desktops replaced. I'd rather invest in this technology that's more of an instructional need in my building. And that's something that we do. We take those 30 computers offline and buy the technology that's going to enhance the classroom. So does that answer?
I think well, my question more is about efficiency and understanding all tech needs for the district and where there could be, if each department or school is kind of making their own decisions that can allow
There's
for
an approval process flow that has to go through technology.
through tech. Okay. And so tech can see
No matter whose budget
where there
covers it.
could be overlaps to build
Absolutely.
efficiency.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Culture and Equity is combined this year into our Exceptional Student Services Department, which is now going to be our Student Support Services Department. Culture and Equity, we had a director. Due to budget cuts and funding, we've reduced that to a specialist that is covered through our federal allocation that uses Title III and Title VI dollars. So all of those support services now are in the Student Support Services budget. Extended learning funds. We only had 4 schools who requested it. We have done an application process every year for curriculum instruction and assessment. And we've had these 4 schools who have wanted to extend learning. Doesn't mean the other schools aren't. It just means they didn't feel they needed funds to do so. So some schools are flexing teacher time, so they have an interventionist who might be coming in at 9 and staying till 4 instead of 8 to 3, so that they can stay an hour after. So there's other extended learning occurring. But as far as the application for funds, there were 4 schools that actually submitted an application with a plan of how they're going to support students who are not competent. Mill levy innovation section. What's listed in mill levy is also then distributed throughout. So there are mill levy funds that are shown in the instruction budget or in the curriculum budget. We list those separate because we've committed to the community that we're always going to be accountable for those funds. Mill levy funds basically go into general fund. It's our commitment to our taxpayers of being transparent about how we use those that's allowed us to separate those out and report them separately, but they're also reported on the given page. So I don't know if that answers the question or... Learning facilitators and instructional resource section. Learning facilitators are teachers who actually participate in the instructional professional development. We call everyone who works with kids a learning facilitator, teachers, instructional paraprofessionals, everyone's a learning facilitator. So that's kind of a bucket group that we use in our language. Assessment budget increased drastically because of iReady. iReady was something that our principals and our ILTs asked for. They wanted a consistent formative measure that they could be comparing across the district. And that's an expensive tool. It's up to like $36 a student. So when you think about the number, that was something we haven't had in the past. So that's in the budget. That's caused the assessment budget to drastically increase in size. I think there's also some additional costs at Access and the ELL side that may also be covered in here, or is that covered in the ELPA budget?
Probably within ELPA.
The ELPA budget.
And that's just going to become more, the iReady is going to become more of a uniform assessment tool as opposed to paying for multiple
Correct.
assessment
Right.
tools.
Instead of STAR and iReady and FastBridge, we will have iReady. We'll have one that'll be comparable, beginning, middle, end for all students, and then progress monitoring throughout the year for students who are off grade level, so that we can monitor their growth and progress. And those will be reports that'll be in the results policies. So you'll get regular reports of how students are growing in those given areas. Are there provisions made for someone to regularly pull? We have a assessment specialist who, now that iReady is a district-sponsored resource, that will be the job of our assessment coordinator to pull those reports. Mariana and I have spoken about that in the past, because some did STAR and some did iReady. We really left it to the school to pull their own data because it wasn't consistent and not every report was what every principal wanted. This certainly, having one data source, is going to allow more district support of that data source. Concurrent enrollment, 451,000, is all post-secondary institutions. And yes, we are drastically increasing the number of students taking post-secondary courses. And that's at the direction of the board because of the grad requirements. Our grad requirements require that students demonstrate competency. And one of the best ways to do that is by taking a rigorous college course, as well as internship hours can be offset by a rigorous off-campus college course. So we are seeing a drastic increase, which is something that prior boards have expressed an interest, so that is reflected in that budget line. Instructional resources, the budget is sizable. Most of it is substitutes. So our lab classrooms are heavily dependent upon bringing teachers in, which requires that we also then send somebody to cover that classroom. So the substitute or the salary line budget in that particular budget is significantly salaries for substitutes. Alternative options. This reflects a pass-through. So for our Colorado Connections Academy, this is the 95% of their revenue that is passed through. So it does increase because they increase. As they increase, that number is going to increase. What's not shown there is the 5% that's retained. So I believe it's about $300,000 is what's kept in general fund as a result of our sponsoring. Now, a lot of that is work that happens in Sam's department. So her staff is still accounting for, reporting. Our HR department is still reporting HR data on behalf of them. So it's not all 300,000 of gravy. It's adding work to our departments, but it certainly is an enhancement to our revenue side. La Plata County Treasurer Collections. She was here earlier. We have to pay.
Wait, was she here to collect?
Yeah, she was here to collect. She wanted to check. No.
Cannot opt out of this.
We pay our proportional share of the operation of the treasurer's office based upon the tax revenues that are collected on our behalf. And so that is a fixed cost. We can't negotiate it. It's every entity who has taxes collected has to pay towards that cost, just like our indirect costs. When we get a grant, we take 8%, 9% off the top because that helps offset the staff that are required to legally report and be accountable for the
Counties
expenditure.
certainly can't afford to do it themselves.
Yeah, sometimes we'd rather not have the grant. So the staff board budget, the retirement dinner, staff appreciation, board dinners are all reflected in. I believe it's professional services line, or is it the supply line? Professional or purchase services? Purchase services line. So all of that is reflected in the purchase services line already. So there's a question about technology and student information systems. Student information system is only buying the licenses for the large packages, Infinite Campus. I think iReady is paid for in student information systems.
iReady is in assessment.
I'm sorry?
iReady is in the assessment.
iReady, okay, but Infinite Campus and not iReady. It's Learning, sorry, I said the wrong one, thank you. It's Learning is covered in that budget. The technology section, the software that they cover is typically the software to maintain the network. It's the network licenses, it's the virus protection, those types of things. So there's no duplicate in there. Google Read and Write is something that has been asked for through our curriculum budget, and there are some licenses for Google Read and Write for those who have requested it. Is that correct? It's still.
Yeah, it's also in the special ed.
And special ed also funds Read and Write for students who that appears in their IEP. So that's not a district-wide resource. It's provided to those who wish to use it. So property and the departments like HR and finance.
Yeah, I
know
can
Sam.
speak to that. Both HR and finance have significant software needs, including our ERP system, the Talent Ed system, the ERO system, our absence management, facility use, and then our new budgetary software that we're going to be implementing. So some of that is just a normal cycle of departments are asked to budget for their own equipment replacement. So computer replacement cycles are paid for out of departmental budgets, but most of that cost would be specific to software systems that are used by the district.
Insurance risk management is going up. We projected a 10% increase. I don't think we've gotten the bill yet, but that we were told to project 10%. Is that correct?
Final quote.
But 10% was what they projected that we needed to calculate, and that's typically, I think SIDSIP has gone up twice that this coming year. So, so I think our move out of SIDSIP was a good move. Other charges increasing from 11,000 to 420,000.
It's a timing issue. You'll see the estimate was updated in the one you have right now. We pay attendance incentives at the very end of the year. So until the end of the school year happens, we don't know how much our support staff and teachers will be able to get for the attendance incentive.
So that's the reflection in the salary line of the increase.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then there's that contingency in there too.
Oh, and the contingency, yeah, the 160,000. That will allow us to hire additional paraprofessionals next year if we have high needs kids who arrive in the district. The Special Projects Fund, that is donations, and ultimately we're asking you to also appropriate fund balance. So any monies left in that account, you have to allow them to spend by appropriating that. So you have to include that in the amount of money that you're allowing them to spend so they can actually spend, even though it's in many cases fundraising accounts from schools, you still have the ultimate authority on whether they can spend it or not. So that's why that amount is so large. Because it
Yeah, there's no reason any of those, the whole fund should never be fully appropriated, because if they raise the money or it's donated, just because they don't spend it in one year doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to spend it the next year.
Yeah, if we got a donation in that account and you didn't authorize it to be spent, it couldn't be spent.
Right.
That's your power. So. Grant services, I'm seeing an answer of yes.
Yes. So
Sorry. Go
within
ahead.
that grants page is all of our federal, state, and private grants. Most of our federal grants cover salaries. So Title I specifically, IDEA is another big one, but primarily those fund salaries within the district. State grants, again, most of those state grants are salary related, but like the additional safety grants, those are going to be held within there. So when you're seeing all the departmental and school pages within this budget, that's general fund only. The grants would be kind of on top of that, layered on top of that, to provide additional supports or additional services.
Interscholastic Activity Fund, that is athletics for middle, high school coaches, benefits, travel, officials, and other supplies. In the budget that you have, we've actually added some additional information at the bottom so you know where the local revenue is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually projected low on fundraising here just until we get our new athletic director in and that he is able to demonstrate that he can do. We have started the Big Red 100 Club, just for your information, if anyone's interested. For $100 a month, you too can have your name on the Big Red 100 board and get some special perks for coming to athletic events. So it's $1,200 a year.
Private parking spots.
So anyway, so if we sold the 100, it would be $120,000 of revenue. So We've kicked that off this week with chamber members and alumni and everyone we could think of. So
About Big Red 20 Club.
we're going to shoot for 100. So I think
I'm sure
we're
there'll
gonna
be
do it.
some tiered.
If you go into the cafeteria at the high school, you'll see a board very similar. That was when they did the last stadium renovation, when they put the lights on, when it became lighted. There is a board with the names of the donors, and so
Still.
very similar.
So you get to keep it for
It's still it's
not,
there
not
forever.
a temporary
Yeah.
thing. You stop giving, you don't get
It's there
stuck.
forever. Well, if you stop giving, we might pluck your name off and put someone else's up. So. Okay. And let's see, private preschool. Yes, we do have a number of students that are in private preschool. That's because of capacity. So sometimes we'll get a child in private preschool who we assess and find that they have special education needs, and therefore we have to provide them childcare or provide them preschool. In that case, instead of disrupting the child and moving them out of a setting where they're familiar, we pay for the preschool and send the resources in to support that child. We would love to have enough preschools in our 9R system to not have to do that, but we don't have enough classroom space to meet those needs. So families will not go out to Sunnyside, will not go out to Fort Lewis Mesa, will not go out to Animas Valley where we may have space. They all want in town, and so ultimately we have added a preschool classroom this year, which will maybe diminish some of that, but again, our preschool needs are increasing as well. Our special ed needs and our preschool needs, especially preschoolers with special ed needs, are drastically increasing. In
And the other component of this is the CPP. So Colorado Preschool Program also provides funding for kids that meet certain factors. So it's not only kids with disabilities, it's also at-risk populations. So we also partner with local area preschools and Head Start programs to cover the cost for those kids to attend preschool. Because again, we do not have the capacity to fill all those slots in our schools, but there are providers that meet the qualifications to and have kids that meet those qualifications. So we help, again, it's being a community partner, we're helping those organizations
And it's
because
only-
we get the
yeah.
slots from the state.
It's only students that either qualify for Colorado Preschool Program, which are having the at-risk factors or a couple of at-risk factors required, or students who qualify for special education support.
Yes, those are the only two that we actually pay for private preschool.
So anything I need to expound on or that we need to give more information on? Sorry. I know I said I could do that fast, but
Well,
a
you
lot
did
of
it
questions.
fast considering the
Yeah.
questions, but I think it was important for everybody to get their questions answered.
You said the FTEs are somewhere.
The FTEs are actually,
See them.
yep, they're right
start
at
on
the beginning
page, I
of the
think,
big
20.
chart,
20?
21.
page 21.
Okay, I'll see if I can find
And
mine.
there was one quick question about the safety and security, the training for 40K. Is that
Oh,
a
shoot,
typical?
did I
That's
miss
our
that?
in-kind matching for the grant that was awarded.
Oh,
So
okay.
we have to do some matching components. A lot of it is just staff time, but one of the components was a training piece. So that's our spend to get the other additional money from the grant for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that chair up there
Somebody got really upset.
from the floor? Right. Any other questions, comments? Moving on.
Thank you for answering all these questions.
Yep, no problem.
6D Juniper School update. We had a meeting this afternoon, Stephanie, Andy, Dan, myself, and Heather Hulk.
Hawk.
And we have I think, I'll have Dan go through it. I think we've made progress, but I think it's not quite finalized yet as far as the dates.
So the terms and conditions document that I'd sent out to you, our intent is that this be put into place based on your motion before any dollars flow. So please know that there's no money going until all of these conditions are met. And we have not signed off on this yet because we met today. And probably our biggest stumbling block is CDOT. We've had a couple of meetings with CDOT where we've had district representatives, Andy, and/or I will be meeting with CDOT this week to get clarification on their timeline, because that timeline is going to drive the rest. So we want to make sure we don't put a timeline in place that doesn't work, or that's not feasible for them. But we also have made it clear we expect to set a timeline that we intend to hold their feet to the fire so that they can meet the expectations to ultimately be able to access the
I'm not
funds.
sure how well that message was understood. She knows that we have a timeline. She knows that we're going to work on it somewhere. But the responses kept being like, well, but then if we need to move it a little, or if we need to adjust it a little or something. So once you really look at the realities of it, I want her to understand then that maybe 24 hours or something, but
I think it's clear too, understanding and what you sign, or,
Exactly.
I mean, if you've signed this and you don't understand it, then shame on you. I
Right.
mean, these dates, this August 15th date, when construction can begin, we have to get there before we could even talk about releasing any draw
Exactly.
of their loans. So,
that was the only thing that made me feel okay, because I kept thinking, she, these dates, she wants to move. But when you said, until we hit the mark, no money goes out, then it was like, okay, play with the dates if you want, but if you don't hit the final date, there's no money.
So if the final date you're saying is August 15th before.
that's
Right
our
now, that's
proposed
the
date right
target.
now.
It kind of
Yeah.
depends on CDOT, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
CDOT right now, they've toyed with a full traffic study, which could take up to a semester. The last meeting, there was some mention of school start times, which seemed to be, that could change things. What we don't know is did it. And that's where we feel like instead of relying on what's being given to us, we feel like Andy or I should meet with CDOT to say, give us a timeline. What do you need to do to approve this? When will you approve it? Because if they say January of 2020, then that changes the whole game for the board, and we need to then come back to you with that, because that means no dollars would flow until then, and then we'll be in the renewal process. And so at that point, then we'd be probably having a different conversation.
So my concerns with this whole thing are that these are all short-term timelines, but there's no inclusion of any long-term timelines in there. And the long-term timelines are the ones that concern me more than the short-term timelines. We've said we'll give them until December and possibly until June, but they still haven't demonstrated to me that they're going to be able to raise enough money to purchase, build, whatever. And to me, it's just like kicking the can, continuing to kick the can down the road. And so I would like some certainty that they're going to have a space identified and that they're going to have a plan for fundraising that gets them to the budget that they need for whatever it is that they're planning. But we can't just keep putting off that planning for 5 years at a time and expect to re-up a loan every 5 years. That was the part that I missed on this.
I think your portion is really around the charter renewal. I mean,
Okay.
that's really what you're talking about is long-term plans, long-term benchmarks, long-term targets. If we mix the two, we're going to really muddy the waters for a potential appeal.
But you know what we could put in here, because we said if they meet these dates or similar modified ones, that they will be out in December or in January. They will be ready to move in. We could put that in here. Because we have, the construction will start at this time and all these things will happen. If it starts at this time, then the estimated move-in time, maybe we could put it that way, put down here a move-in time to that facility would be January 1 or something like that.
And we can make that decision once we know from CDOT what their timeline is. Heather said today it's 2 to 3 months of actual renovation time.
So if they hit our target either August or even September, if it's 2 to 3 months, October, November, December, if they had all of October, November, and all of December, they should be able to move in January. So that could be a target move-in time, something like that. I mean, you would have to talk, you and Andy would have to look at things and all, but if you could pick a target move-in time, that might be helpful.
What would be really helpful, and we postponed it from this meeting, we're going to do
Right.
an executive session, and this is going to be a long meeting as it is. It would be great for us in August for us to present to you the renewal process, the renewal timeline, and all that goes into that. Because what I'm really trying to do for you is to keep these separate.
Right.
Because if we merge this into that process, there's going to be some appeal grounds that you could lose on. And my goal, or my job for you, is to make sure I don't put you in that position. So I'd love that opportunity in August's work session to bring to you the whole renewal process and how not doing this, how failing to do some of this can play into that, but keeping them as separate, if at all possible, because
Would it be,
I don't want to take away your...
reasonable to have an estimated move-in time?
Oh, I think we could put that on there. I guess my worry about spending time on this is until we talk to CDOT.
No, but
Yeah,
I don't
I
want to
agree.
put it in now, but like if you work out all the above.
If we
and
could get
put
to
that
August 15th, we could say vacate our premises by January 1st. There's no question about that.
And the other thing,
That's
Sherry,
gonna be-
about,
You want to know that.
Sherry, about the fundraising, Stephanie and I previously had brought up that we wanted to put in there that they will raise this much money by this time, but we can't legally do that. We can encourage fundraising and we can check on them and say, we expect it, but we can't put numbers and things like that on it.
I don't even care, you know, for me, that's their, in a way,
Right.
that's their issue.
Right.
But I want there to be a location identified. I don't want this to keep going on and on and on. I mean, it's gone on for 3 years now, and it's not clear that a location is going to become any more available or any more affordable in a location that they will be satisfied with. And my concern is that we're just going to come up against this again. And I'm fine talking about it as a different issue than this short-term loan. But for me, that is the biggest issue. Is
Well, if they put this much money in it and they paid the loan back, truthfully, I don't think they're going to be able to move for a long, long time. They're not going to be able to buy another building or
Well, they're not going to buy
renovate
this
another
building.
building.
They're not
No,
buying
no,
this building.
but I think they're going to have to stay in their lease. I mean, that's my guess. They're going to have to stay in that lease for 8 to 100 years.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
for RFP. So there's going to be an RFP, you know, we're looking at something that can be done by January. Do we have any way to see what the request itself looks like? If it has a December, that it be completed by December? Or do we have any way to see what the bids come back, that somebody says they can do it by December?
You've got August 15th, your 9R Board of Education approves project scope and budget.
Okay.
And so that would come back to you with the bids to say, here's the bidder, here's their timeline, here's their.
Okay.
So prior to our even allowing them to draw on the 400,000, that will have to happen.
But I think what I heard from what you said too was not only like reviewing the RFPs once they came in, but actually making sure that the RFP request language indicates a
Yeah,
stipulation.
Andy's already begun working with them around the RFP process. They have a contractor who has been very generous in allowing some volunteer labor to offset costs. What we've said is we still want you to honor our bidding process. So we do want you to go out, put it out. The likelihood, to be real frank, from our own experience from bidding construction projects during the summer that are small like this, you're going to get very few bidders. But we felt like we want to uphold that expectation, that we send it out and we provide others an opportunity of saying, I could do that for you for less or more or whatever it may be. And so that's why I think Andy added this, just really wanting to be true to our policy, which is this is something we would bid, and therefore they should bid, because it's the money that you're actually allowing them to use from your construction loan.
Basically, it's their job to do all this,
Yeah.
but we're going to be managing it. And it's too
Gonna be
bad, it
overseeing
costs
it.
our
Okay.
Andy time, a lot of Andy's time, a lot of Dan's time, but if we don't do it, we could end up in a real mess.
They're paying for all of the application fees and
They've already paid $10,000
Permit fees.
for the CDOT study that they're underway right now. So they've already paid that, and they'll have to pay for the architectural drawings. So they're drawing down some of their fund balance while we get to the point where we're even going to allow them to
So
draw.
the only thing we're contributing is time.
Right now, it's time.
Any costs that come up, they have to do them.
they're
Correct.
using fund balance for that.
They're using their $290,000 fund balance.
They have committed capital funds in their budget. Why aren't they using that?
Well, that might be what they're using. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have, I mean, I'm just saying, rather than taken from their fund balance.
I don't know if they actually can use those for the
Need to sleep.
Okay.
You can just sit here and talk.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we've asked them to provide by Monday is their complete executed lease. We will get that to our attorney to look at, to see if there are any outs, should we ultimately find we can't make this happen. It's their commitment, not
She
ours.
didn't understand the lease.
Yeah.
Because I said, every lease has an exit provision, like if you leave your lease early, you're gonna have to pay
There's a
this much or
penalty.
whatever.
Yeah.
She said she didn't know if there was one in there.
Right, so our goal
So
is
we
to
need
get
to go
it,
over that
send
too.
it to our attorney and let him advise you if there are any. So if we get to the point that CDOT says, yes, it will be a year-long study, we won't get back to you till next June, then I think we have some responsibility recognizing that it's their money that they're managing, but it is taxpayer dollars, to see if we can't leverage some type of an out for them. What they would do, I don't know, and that comes into the renewal process. That
What about the
obviously
whole
will be-
idea of like just busing kids, and do you still need the CDOT study if you do that?
We threw that out. What we don't know is if it changed their position. Daniel, our Director of Transportation, attended and did indicate, and Heather committed to requiring families to participate in busing, even if it's 3 central stops here in town instead of going to the high school. We know sometimes elementary parents don't want their kids to transfer at the high school. So we've thrown out some options. That was all laid out to CDOT. Andy and I were not at that meeting, so that's where we feel like we need to sit down and say, okay, tell us where you are. What are you requiring? So
Because none of this, all these timelines are just too short.
they're aggressive.
They're
Very aggressive.
I'm sorry, all these
Optimistic.
timelines are aggressive.
Yeah, and I think that making sure it's crystal clear, the December out or moving date or what have you, I think is especially key, because that letter that showed up on their website was very troubling to me, especially because they made a point and then they put it in all caps.
Yeah, and then repeated it.
Yes.
I actually
So it's
phoned
very
her on
concerning.
that,
Mhm.
and I said, what's going on here? And she said that the board met, this is her version, the board met and decided so that the parents could be comfortable and feel safe, they would say that. They deliberately said that. I mean, it wasn't a
Where were all these gun
typo.
people for that? Thinking
Yeah.
we're not being
Yeah.
transparent.
So that's something that we need to work with them on. How does a board function and,
Yeah, that was a big red flag for me. I
Yeah.
didn't like that at all.
Anything else on this matter?
Nope.
Nick is enjoying it.
You do have their financials, so
I
just
thought, Nancy, I thought you were going to have do not bad now.
We're gonna have, Dan, you're gonna give Daryl, our legal counsel, is gonna go over the
once we get the lease on
agreements.
no later than Monday, which is the first deadline we've imposed. I haven't signed, but we'll reiterate that to Heather in an email. As soon as we get it, we'll forward it on to the attorney for him to look at and give us advice on whether there's any out clauses.
if they don't have that. Actually, you'd think that the owner would have that because he would want to put in a penalty if you try to leave. So there has to be something in
They
there.
did have an attorney involved, so I'm hopeful
Right.
there might be
Yeah.
something,
Nick
but
and Nisi.
until we get it, we'll hold judgment.
Speaking to the aggressive timeline, Mick, I think that was our way of helping them to understand the seriousness of this
And there may be some
endeavor.
wiggle room, but,
There's no wiggle room.
well, I mean, like she was saying, well, if something comes up and we can't meet that deadline, we can have more time. And we were saying limited.
Word
She
could
seemed
say-
surprised too, and not to understand when I said the board is gravely concerned about this. It was like, why? What was it? She said
Well, you said we were fearful of this. I said, I'm
Yes.
not fearful. I'm concerned that by June 2020, none of this will take place and we will be out $400,000.
Yeah.
That is a very real possibility if CDOT does take a long time and does in fact say, oh yeah, you need $1 million light there. So
she said
that
it would only
one,
be 500,000.
well, then she said
1.5 million.
1.2
The state,
during the
won't-
meeting.
Our understanding is the state won't even look at the permit until they have the CDOT study.
Yeah.
So the CDOT study is going to drive
It's going
anything
to-
else moving forward.
It's going to be a make or break.
But it helped me to know when Dan said, no money is drawn down until all of this happens. So it's not, it's not gonna, okay, here's a check, and so
That's
that's
what you
good.
voted on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys
Got to
were
make
bright.
it more clear sometimes. All right, let's move on. Superintendent's report,
School board election.
election information.
So as your board clerk, Sarah, that's her over here.
Let's put it up there.
Sarah wanted to alert you that obviously board districts B and D are up. We did feel like, since this is our last meeting until we meet second week in August, that we wanted to assess whether we wanted to go ahead and schedule and promote an information session for interested candidates. And so our intent tonight was really to get this on the calendar so you could give us some dates that a couple of you or 2 or 3 of you might be interested in doing just a board information session. So then we would advertise in July, probably different occasions during July, trying to hit the different audiences so that people who were interested would know those seats are up, and 2, that they could come to learn more.
I can commit to doing stuff on a session on a weekends, on a Saturday. So I can, everything else is kind of loosey-goosey, but Saturday I can do.
That actually might be good for candidates.
Yeah, maybe we could do some in the week and some, because people might be traveling, camping on the weekends and stuff.
Just check.
Actually, just 2 at a time, otherwise it's a meeting.
I thought it would be good if we all took maybe 5 minutes and what's a cheat sheet? What do you wish somebody might have told you about what coming on the board was going to mean in terms of your time, your study time, all of that? Just a 5-minute thing that we could then have just a bulleted or short narrative. Here's what you really need to think about. As you found out, well, if my job changes and I'm gone a lot and I have kids or whatever, it becomes
Bree had the
challenging.
same thing.
Huh?
Remember Bree, she had the same issue.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so we'll commit to jotting down any ideas you have you want to pass
Who
on.
wants to collect them? Should we send them to Sarah?
Yeah.
Or you, or?
Is there any chance we can look at calendars to put something on, because you were not meeting again until August?
Right.
So this would be petitions to be picked up by candidates starting August 7th. So-
August 7th is when people can pick up.
I don't
August
know if we
7th.
should do it before then.
Really?
Do
I think we should do it before they pick up the papers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh.
definitely.
Because then they don't have to go through the process of picking all that stuff up if they decide.
Yeah, but if they don't want to pick it up, they shouldn't be.
Plus, we get to find out who might be interested.
Think you want to
Yeah.
know? I can look at my calendar for July, and I can do it anytime
It
sometime.
would be July, that would be when you want to take a look at it.
Oh my God. Well,
I am open
I can tell
after
you.
the 4th of July week.
So, and you're promoting a weekend?
Do you want 1 session or 2, Sarah?
It's your call.
I can do it in the evening after work.
An evening's
during the
probably
week.
better for some people, of course.
During the week, I can do it.
So if we did a weekday evening and then 1 weekend?
Sure. I would
Should do it.
suggest closer to the end of July, just because that's when,
Yeah.
Right.
we're getting closer to the petitions. So maybe July, do you want to do a Tuesday night?
I don't know.
The second Tuesday of the month, just so people keep in their, like,
So the second Tuesday of the month is the 9th.
That's early.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the month.
well, then, I'm sorry, then the fourth Tuesday, so they stay in that part
So
of their
then it
time.
would be the 23rd, July
So I'm out of town for work that day, the 23rd. During the 23rd, I'm out of town for work.
Okay.
But I can do the prior Tuesday, the 16th, or the 30th.
30th probably would be better. 16th just seems like it's in the middle of
30th.
summer. I don't know
I
that
can
people
do
are
the
going to pay
30th
attention.
probably.
You want to do the 30th?
I will check to make sure, but.
And a weekend one?
I think, the 27th.
Okay. And are you suggesting the afternoon, Mick, or morning, afternoon?
I think first thing in the morning would be
Bet
best
morning
for people.
better.
I think morning would be better
Yeah.
before they, before
9
they
a.m.,
go
8
fishing.
a.m.?
AM, 9,
Okay.
Yep.
right near the farmers market, since people will be there anyway.
That would be great.
And
Actually, at the farmers market.
Yes.
At the farmers market.
Yes.
Not necessarily a booth, but
5:30.
5:30 probably.
The part,
What about that 11th Street station?
Yeah.
And just sit in those
5:30.
picnic tables.
30th is
I think we should totally do the
It's the
farmers
time they're
markets.
going to have to
And
get
one
used to
of the
coming if they want to be board members.
Actually, Ferguson runs the farmers market.
Okay.
So you two want to do that?
She's got a,
No, I'm
You've got a week
I can do, I can, that weekend I can do.
okay.
I'm in
Do we have 2 days?
So I can,
The
Is somebody else doing this with me on the 30th, or am I?
30th?
Lorraine.
I think Mariana's
You don't want to,
available.
you don't want
Mariana,
to
you
do
going to do
that.
the evening with her? or-
I can do either of those. I like the farmers,
Do you
I
wanna
really
do
think we
something?
should do a meeting at the
Not right
farmers
this
I
market.
can make the
If we can
farmers.
post it, I wouldn't worry about limiting yourself to 2. To me, that this is something that could,
Yeah.
it's very easy to post and just say it's board orientation or potential board member
Yeah.
orientation.
It's an awkward time for me because my daughter's going to be in town. But if it's short, I could maybe make one of them.
I don't think they'd be more than an hour. I'd be shocked if it's more than an hour.
We call them FAQs.
I think you
So, who wants to do which
Yeah.
day? Mariana?
Yeah, I'll do both, that's fine.
Okay. Want to go?
Yes.
Okay, 30th?
I can do with you.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
No? Stephanie, you want to?
Put him down, and then Stephanie and I will look at it as it gets closer and see if we want to jump in or not. But we have 2 people for each one already, so maybe this will be one time where the people who talk all the time won't talk so much.
Posting's not an issue.
Yeah.
Real quickly, Andy just sent this, this just in. Russell Engineering will have their initial study done by June 28th on traffic for CDOT, then to determine if they're going to require anything else.
Oh,
So,
okay, cool.
so we are in a timeline that might work on a July 15th.
Right.
So
Wonderful.
we'll keep you
it
posted.
there.
Very
Andy,
good. Way to
thank
go,
you.
Andy.
An organization like that is going to work fast.
I think some of those engineering.
Like it's Russell.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Nancy,
Okay.
is there a way we can switch the board development 7 and 8 so that the DESPA and DEA people, if they want to leave, they could go?
What do we have
Sure.
to do?
Well, matters reserved for board action is
Don't
number
tell
8.
Robert, but we're-
Right, but I mean, that's probably what they're waiting for,
Switch 7.
as opposed to the board work
Just wondering.
plan.
What are we supposed to be doing on the work plan development anyway?
Well,
We're supposed to fill in the.
yeah, it's gonna take a while.
That was the thing that we put off.
It's gonna make that happen.
So, okay,
Are we
so.
allowed to switch 8 and 7, so we can vote on it?
Tonight is, we're gonna do what we need to do to get it done efficiently. So we'll switch to 8.
And come back to 7.
You talking about supplemental budget or what?
Yep. Need a motion?
I move that the board approve the proposed 2019-2020 master agreement as presented between the Durango Education
Wrong
Association.
one.
No, that's not.
I'm sorry.
That's
That's
E.
eight.
Well, she's trying to do 8B and
Okay,
C
Oh, do you wanna
before
do-
even A.
okay.
Sorry, but I can
That's
read
okay.
A.
That's okay, go ahead.
You
Go
sure?
ahead.
So we're on
Okay.
8B.
So
folks.
8B, I move that the board approve the proposed 2019-20 master agreement as presented between the Durango Education Association and Durango School District 9R.
Do we have a
I'm
second?
really sorry.
Second.
So we're coming back to 8A?
Yes.
Afterwards.
Second.
Any discussion on this? Do we wait
I
for
think,
Mariana?
I think the folks that were representing the board or the district did a fine job of explaining things to us.
Yeah.
So I don't have any questions.
No, I agree with Nick. It was not an easy process this year, but I think the struggle that people went through, it made the outcomes even better.
I was pleased to see that it passed with a strong majority.
Any questions about, okay, Sarah, please.
Mariana, we are on 8B.
Got it, thank you.
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Sauter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Oh, aye.
Mariana Valdez.
Aye.
And, okay to do
So, we're at
8C?
8C.
Okay, I move that the board ratify the attached 2019-20 master agreement developed through negotiations with the Durango Education Support Professional Association.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Triple second.
That's it. No problem.
Same thing, that the organization, the efforts, the work that was put into this, the blood, sweat, and tears. Very proud of everyone who was involved and very pleased with the outcome. Sarah?
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Sauter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Mariana Valdez.
Aye.
All right, you're going to be happy now, Sarah, because we're going back to 8A.
Okay. Do we want to do 7A or do we want to do 8A?
Let's just
Let's just do
finish 8 and then
finish
go
8.
back to 7.
Okay.
What the hell?
I move that the board approve the 2018-19 supplemental budget amendment as presented.
Second.
Questions, comments?
The supplemental budget is to clean up any funds where transfers are needed to ensure that we appropriate all dollars that are in the budget, as well as cover any overages that may have occurred. A lot of that does happen in our transfer funds. So,
And I have one comment because this is, I think, my wording issue on mine. On the resolution up the top, not in the document, but in the top part, it talks about the transfer for grants. Grants is actually not a transfer. It's just we got additional money, so we needed to appropriate more money. So it's not, we're not transferring any money into grants. We're just spending more because we got more awarded. So that's a caveat to that.
It's nice to have a happy problem every once in a while.
Correct. Just one tiny note, there's like a period or a comma missing on the 50,000, I think, for
Okay.
additional transfers from the general fund in the table.
Perfect.
That's all.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Okey-dokey.
couple extras.
Sarah?
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Sauter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Mariana Valdez.
Aye.
Okay, well, as long as we're
8D?
cleaning up
8D.
A, let's go to 8D. D is in.
I recommend that the resolution adopting the recommended budget for 2019-20 and authorizing the use of a portion of the beginning fund balance be approved as presented.
Second.
So this is the budget that we reviewed in greater detail earlier today, so we're just asking for your approval.
I have no comments.
Questions, comments? Okay, Sarah.
Nick had a comment.
I said I had no
Oh,
comment.
I
I said I had no comment.
I said I have one comment.
I have no comment. No, that was mine.
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Souter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Marianne Valdez.
Aye.
Should we do 8E again?
8E, yeah.
No.
Did we do
8, 8F,
Yeah, we
DEA,
did.
DESPA Insurance Fund, MOU.
I move that the board approve the attached MOU between the district, DEA, and DESPA.
Second,
So this MOU simply outlines how we'll deal with any excess insurance premiums that are left in the account after all bills are paid. So it's an agreement that was reached at the end of negotiations, so it's an MOU.
and did we already do G and H? Because you asked us to move it, or
G&H
did we forget?
removed. G&H
So we're-
removed to consent.
So we don't have to deal with those.
You have to vote on
We have
that.
We have to
on this
vote on
one
We do
it.
have to vote.
You're moving too
Oh,
fast,
we didn't
Stephanie.
finish that.
Anybody? Questions?
Questions, comments? Go, Sarah.
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Souter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Marianne Valdez.
Aye.
Now we're down to I.
Aye. Athletics and activities compensation schedule revisions.
I move that the board approve the Athletic and Activities Compensation Committee recommendations for the 2019-20 compensation schedule.
Second,
This is a follow-up from last meeting. Laura presented, and just you wanted some time to be able to look at it, and I believe we provided you her PowerPoint, so.
Questions?
So what is the percent? That's a percent increase from the prior year?
Laura, percent increase on
Oh, it's a
the
percent
activities?
increase
Yeah,
above.
it's not a straight percent increase, it's an increase that's reflected looking at market value, so some have very little increase, middle school is seeing the largest increase. It's not a flat rate all across.
It was decided by the committee of coaches and staff.
But it's
based
an
upon market.
increase from when? From
This past year.
this past year?
It's
Okay.
actually an increase from 16-17, and actually I believe it's an increase from 14-15. They've had no change to their schedule since 2014-2015.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sarah?
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Souter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Marianne Valdez.
Aye.
One more, 8J.
8J.
I move that the board authorize the superintendent to accept project and purchase bids during July 2019 as outlined in the attached resolution.
second,
This is on here, similar to most boards in the state, because you don't meet in July. If we had a purchase agreement, we would have to hold on that project until you came back. This basically outlines conditions under which I can pre-approve those and still bring them back to you for public approval at your first meeting in August.
Questions, comments?
Are there any particular ones that you're anticipating coming in?
We get paper bid, we get some construction project bids over the summer for the capital projects that are in the board budget. In the past, we've had to scramble and have a 7:15 meeting with board members to get those approved. And CASB recommended that we look at other districts, because that's been the practice of most other districts, is that the board says as long as you're going with the lowest bid, and you're going to bring it to us, go ahead and move forward on those projects and authorize the superintendent to do so during July.
Thanks.
Okay. Sarah?
Sherry Bird.
Aye.
Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Souter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Marianne Valdez.
aye.
Let's go ahead and vote on the consent agendas, and then
Come back to
all we
board
have
development.
left is the work plan and new business.
Okay. I move that we approve the superintendent's consent agenda and the board's consent agenda as proposed.
Second,
Questions, comments?
Somebody second.
Yeah, Sherry.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question? So with some of the bids, I saw that there were like no bids, there was just one bid and others like declined to bid, and you had said that it's hard to get people to. Has there been any other sort of looking into why people might not want to bid with us? Like,
Number one, people in Durango are pretty busy, so contractors, it's the size of the project that will cause some of them to say, I'm not interested, it's not big enough for me to mobilize my crews. So we do active outreach, trying to get more bidders, but there gets a point where you just don't. We had one bid for the high school remodel last summer, and that was with extensive outreach. We had about four walk through in the pre-bid process. Only one chose to actually submit a bid.
so because that sounds like a pretty big project to me. But so what I'm trying to get at more politely, but my words are slipping out, is like, is there any sort of like, has anyone dug to see if there's any other reason why, like maybe contractors would have gotten around that they don't like don't like to work with us or something?
I know on the college we reached out and bidders just said it was too small of a job for them. They were too busy and had too many options on the table. So we did on the high school renovations for PCC. I don't know. Do you guys have any other?
I'd say that every school district I've ever worked at or been a part of has a very difficult time getting contractors to bid on construction projects.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Post all bids on the district website, and then when appropriate, that's the board that oversees the best grant program. They've got a listserv that the school district named contractors are on, so we'll send it out to the appropriate departments as well and see. So definitely try to reach out to vendors to the extent really to do a surveillance project, 11 vendors on master facility plans, 6 responses to that. So it's a situation of services we are seeing individuals on construction related. So we also reach out to Arlington and Albuquerque area firms, architects. It's been coming to us from Oklahoma City in the last few years as well. So we're not only looking into Durango or the Colorado area, but even the surrounding states.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. All right, I'm good.
Okay, Sarah?
Sherry Bird. Aye. Stephanie Moran.
Aye.
Nick Sauter.
Aye.
Nancy Stubbs.
Aye.
Marion Valdez.
Aye.
Okay, so we will, the board is going to go into the, Conference room to do an exercise for developing next year's work plan.
No, we're going to develop next year's work.
We're going to develop.
No calisthenics.
We're going to do an exercise that develops.
Oh, how soon we forget.
So it is
So
open to the public, so anyone who wants
yeah,
to come
if
is
you would
welcome.
like to come,
Do we
you
have an
may.
executive session still?
No.
Otherwise, thank you
Took that
for
off.
sticking around.
Took that off. Are we going to finish up in there? Are we saying, are we coming back?
We might come back. I have some SAT and PSAT data that I thought would be
Okay.
getting results on our calendar.
What do we need to take, Nick?
Post-it notes. And a pen.
Okay.